Is he ready? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the State Board meeting to order. Ms. Cordial, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham. Board Member Flores. Board Member Goff.
Here.
Board Member McClellan. Here. Board Member Rankin.
Here.
Board Member Shuffle. Here. Board Member Schroeder.
Thank you. Board Member McClellan, would you please lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda, please? Please. Thank you. Is there a second? Any concerns? Everybody in favor? Thank you. Next item is I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Board Member Sheffel, would you read that for us, please?
I move to approve the agenda as published.
No?
I'm sorry.
We're in the next place.
I
The
move to
consent
place the
agenda.
following matters on the consent agenda. There you go.
Okay, read them. Thank you.
Regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license and authorization charge number 2014EC1048, direct department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the license and authorization holder's professional teacher license and substitute authorization. Regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license charge number 2017EC1415, direct department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the license holder's professional teacher's license. Regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning on the application charge number 2017EC1636, direct the chair of the State Board to sign the denial order concerning the applicant's substitute authorization application. Regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an authorization charge number 2018EC222, accept the terms and conditions of the stipulation and final agency order by directing the chair of the State Board to sign the final agency order. Approve the 6 initial emergency authorization requests as signed forth in the published agenda. Approve University of Northern Colorado's request for 3 additional educator preparation endorsements, including gifted, core, gifted specialist, and director of gifted education as set forth in the published agenda. Approve Mountain Bosie's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. Approve Relay Graduate School of Education's request for authorization of a special education generalist endorsement as set forth in the published agenda. Approve Colorado State University Pueblo's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. Approve Colorado Mountain College's request for their authorization of a special education generalist endorsement as set forth in the published agenda. Approve the fiscal year 19 expelled and at-risk student service grant recipients and amount of grant awards as set forth in the published agenda. Appoint Heather Alderman, Jill Coet, Lori Differline, Amy Dobrani, Heidi Graber, Amy Rosenkrantz Smith, Missy Siders, and Cassie Sudbeck to the Colorado Special Education Advisory Committee. Approve the payments to the administrative units for students in the high cost and administrative unit and out-of-district placement of programs as set forth in the agenda. Appoint Dee Leba, Marcio Grady, Joanna Peters, Brandon Helwig, Kim McLaughlin, and Yanni Geffen to the State Advisory Council for Parent Involvement in Education to fill the vacant positions for a 3-year term. This is the end of the consent agenda.
Thank you. That's a proper motion. Do I have a second? Second. Ms. Goff? Any items would you like to have pulled? Board Member Rankin?
I would like to pull 1301, recommend expelled and at-risk student services grant recipients.
Okay. Any others, folks? Thank you. So we'll put 1301 at the end of the day for today.
Yes, that'll be taken up about 4:15 or so.
Well, that's dreamy. Oh, that's before, okay, got it. Any concerns other than that? Approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a report from Mrs. Cordial. What do you have for us today, please?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Commissioner Anthus. This morning wouldn't be the same without my friendly reminder to board members and presenters to please speak clearly into your microphones. Those of you needing to connect to CDE's Guest Wireless, locate the CDE hotspot, and the password is silver capital S. Really quickly, before I start going in your board packets, it's Thank a Teacher
Oh, good.
Month. And so we have signs on the back table for you all to sign or to fill this in with your favorite teacher or multiple teachers. And then either at a break or over lunch, we can get a group photo of you all. We have fun colored markers on the back table as well. Katie will go over that more in her report tomorrow. So in your board packets, you have the following: your quick glance expense report and events calendar, and a few upcoming events I'd like to remind you of include the National Forum on Education Policy held in Washington, D.C., June 27th through 29th, and then the Case Summer Convention in Breckenridge, July 23rd through 27th. And I just want to put a quick plug in to remind you to let Carol know if you would like to attend that conference.
So the hotel is already full for the ECS conference?
Okay.
So, yep, they're trying to find an overflow hotel right now.
Okay.
I've been working on this myself,
Okay.
just FYI.
Thank you.
I'm going to it if I find a hotel. Yes, I'm signed up.
The only other thing I would like to note is that CDE will be closed on Monday, May 28th in observance of Memorial Day. In your board packets and or available on board docs are the following materials for Wednesday, May 9th. For item 7.01, you have a memo regarding the accountability hearing for the Minot Elementary School, accompanying PowerPoints, CDE's background report for Minot, the 2017 State Review Panel recommendation, Montezuma Cortez's pathway proposal for Minot, the final 2017 school performance framework, and a letter of support from UVA, which is sitting on your board bench before you. For item 11.01, you have a memo regarding the health and physical education, reading, writing, and communicating, and science standards, an accompanying PowerPoint, the final recommendations overview, as well as the final proposal for all three standards, the state board's review and revision schedule, proposed amendments from board members Sheffel and Durham, and public feedback received on both the health and PE and science standards. And those are sitting on the board bench before you. Item 12.05, you have a memo regarding the 6 initial emergency authorization requests. Item 12.06, you have a memo regarding the University of Northern Colorado's request for authorization of 3 additional educator prep programs. For item 12.07, you have a memo regarding Mountain BOCES request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program and their supporting materials. For item 12.08, you have a memo regarding Relay Graduate School of Education's request for authorization of a special education generalist endorsement. For item 12.09, you have a memo regarding Colorado State University Pueblo's request for an amendment to their alternative educator prep program and their supporting materials. For item 12.10, you have a memo regarding Colorado Mountain College's request for authorization of their bilingual education and special education generalist endorsements. For item 13.01, you have a memo regarding the expelled and at-risk student services grant recipients in the list of grant recommendations. For item 14.01, you have a memo regarding the certification of state share entitlements and the supporting accounting report. For item 15.01, you have a memo regarding the appointments to the Colorado Special Education Committee, Advisory Committee, and supporting materials. For item 15.02, you have a memo regarding the special education fiscal allocations and supporting materials. For item 16.01, you have a memo regarding the appointments to the State Advisory Council for Parent Involvement in Education, as well as their supporting materials. And for Thursday, May 10th, item 3.01, you have a memo regarding the rules for the administration of a statewide system to evaluate the effectiveness of licensed personnel employed by school districts and boards of cooperative services, 1 CCR 301-87, an accompanying PowerPoint that will be for all 3 rulemaking hearings for Thursday, a red line and clean copy of the rules to statute crosswalk, and response to comments document. For item 3.02, you have a memo regarding the rules for the Colorado Educator Licensing Act of 91, 1 CCR 301-37, a red line and clean copy of the rules to statute crosswalk, and response to comments document. For item 3.01, you have a memo regarding the rules for the administration of the educator licensure endorsements, 1 CCR 301-101, clean copy of the rules and response to comments document. For item 4.01, you have a memo regarding the social studies and mathematics standards and the final proposed content standards. You have Board Member Rankin's redline proposed amendments document. You have the Social Studies Committee response to her proposed amendments documents, and then public feedback on the social studies standards. And we will provide those to you at the end of the day, so you have them for tomorrow. For item 6.01, and the last one is item 6.01, a memo regarding Westminster's innovation application request on behalf of John E. Marzano Academy and their supporting materials. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions, folks? All right, we'll move on to item 7.01. Colorado State Board of Education will now conduct a hearing in case number 18-AR-02, the accountability recommendations concerning Manaw Elementary School in Montezuma-Cortez RE1 district. Under the Education Accountability Act of 2009, if a school receives a priority improvement or turnaround rating for more than 5 consecutive years, the State Board of Education must direct an action to the local Board of Education. Manaw Elementary School will enter its 6th year of priority improvement or turnaround on July 1, 2018. During this hearing, the board is acting in its capacity to take into account the recommendation of the State Review Panel pursuant to 22-11-2105B CRS. The Commissioner and her staff are here today to present an overview of the accountability clock process, data and background information regarding Manaw Elementary School, and the evaluation of the school's innovation plan. Montezuma-Cortez RE1 district will present its proposal for external management as the accountability pathway for the school. The State Review Panel, an independent body of education experts, has issued a recommendation regarding Manaw Elementary School that is part of the hearing record and is included in the board packet. In the case of Manaw Elementary School, the State Review Panel conducted a site visit and documents review in 2017. After the 2017 site visit, the State Review Panel recommended external management. The State Board's consideration of the matter shall be limited to materials submitted by the district and background information submitted by the department and maintained in the record of proceedings. At the hearing, the district shall have a maximum of 30 minutes to present its report. Board members may not interrupt with questions during this time. Board members will have an opportunity to ask questions after the district completes its presentation. The hearing shall proceed as follows. The department will give a brief presentation providing background information on the process and school. The district shall present its 30 minutes report for Manaw Elementary School. Ms. Cordial will let you know when 5 minutes are remaining for your presentation. Following the presentation, the State Board will have the opportunity to ask questions of the district, department, or legal counsel for a time period not to exceed 2 hours. The State Board may ask the district to submit proposed written final determination for the State Board's consideration with support from the department. The State Board will consider and adopt a written determination at a subsequent board meeting, and that would be the June board meeting. At this time, I would ask the department to introduce themselves, please, for the record, and to begin their brief presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Katie Anthus, Commissioner of Education.
Nicole Monet, Turnaround Support Manager.
Brenda Bouch, Accountability Specialist.
Alyssa Pearson, Associate Commissioner.
Thank you. So I will start out with some introductory remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Brenda Bouch to give some of that contextual information for you. So first, I want to thank Superintendent Hockness, Board President Wright, and Carol Mahasey for coming down today. Appreciate the time and the distance you've come for this. We are really pleased. We have a great partnership with Montezuma-Cortez District and have been working really hard with them over the past several years. We are really happy to report that the district as a whole, you saw them here last year, came off the clock this year. So we are seeing some progress. Mesa Elementary School in the district improved from turnaround to priority improvement, and Kemper Elementary has continued their upward trajectory and stayed off of the accountability clock. So we have seen some good academic gains and some progress in other schools across Montezuma-Cortez. We do have confidence that this superintendent is urgently focused on improvement. She continues to be deeply engaged. She makes critical decisions and directional changes as necessary. And as I mentioned before, they have been great open partners in this work. We know that Manaw student achievement dipped last year, and so we redoubled our efforts in working with the district and really pushed them on the plans and the actions that they are taking. We now think that if implemented well, the plan will see improved student achievement. We have discussed that because of the dip in student achievement last year, this school will be on a shorter list to come back to you for more frequent check-ins. And so they would come back to you in fall of 2019 if they haven't seen improvement. So we do recognize that this is an outlier and it has gone down. So the district has agreed to that approach. The district does continue to have some contextual challenge. They are remote rural, and this leads to a tight pipeline of educators. They struggle to replace their teachers and principals if they lose them. For example, the search for a principal for opening Mesa for next year lasted more than 3 months and resulted in 1 qualified candidate. In order to support this teacher and principal pipeline that they know they need, they are creating a whole new set of initiatives. They're working with Betcher partnership to increase the pipeline, and they're creating a Teach in Southwest Colorado initiative to encourage folks to come to their very beautiful part of the state, I might add. So for all of you listening out there, so they are really tackling that pipeline issue in a proactive way. I visited the school, the district staff, the superintendent, and 2 board members in January, and we had very frank conversations about where they are and where Minot is. Even with their contextual challenges, their bar for achievement and for making tough decisions remains high. The Mountain Ute Indian tribe is half of their student population in Minot, and this is an important contextual piece. It's a deep community-rooted school, and that is critical. The district, with our advisement, also took on a deeper partnership with their management partner of UVA, and they added an additional partner, Relay, because they were seeing, and we were seeing, that they needed extra support and expertise in instructional changes and rigor. And so they have adopted those recommendations and are working very closely with us in that. Again, we believe that this superintendent is the right one to lead this challenge, and she has seen improvements in other areas in the district in her time here as superintendent. I believe this is your 3rd year? Yes. So in her 3 years, she is already seeing a lot of improvements in other areas, and we believe with the focus on Minot now, and with this plan, they will continue to turn the trajectory around. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bausch to give some other contextual information.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner Anthus. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The flow chart that you see on the screen right now represents the process for the schools that reach the end of the clock. The State Board is required to take into consideration the recommendation of the State Review Panel. We have also provided a commissioner report and a district proposal, and we will be talking through those today. Under statute, the 4 options for a district-run public school that reaches the end of the clock are management by a public or private entity, innovation status, conversion to a charter school, or school closure. This graphic represents the timeline of Minot Elementary on the accountability clock. They first received a preliminary rating of priority improvement in August 2011, and then that became their final rating and went into effect the following July. Since then, they've remained on the accountability clock with priority improvement or turnaround ratings. And there was a State Review Panel visit that occurred in May of 2017. They are before you today to receive a directed action from the State Board. The school district has 10 schools. 4 of them are on the accountability clock and priority improvement or turnaround. 5 schools are in improvement or performance, and 1 school had insufficient data. And here's another chart to reflect those ratings from last year as well as from previous years. Minot Elementary is about to enter its 6th consecutive year on July 1st, 2018, and as such, the State Board must direct an action prior to that date. The school did see a dip in the percentage of points received on the school performance framework from 40% of points to 25% of points in the past year. And this chart demonstrates the individual ratings over time. So you can see that there were some meets ratings in reading growth in 2010 and 2012. But other than that, there's been mostly approaching or does not meet ratings. And there were does not meet ratings in achievement and growth in reading and math on the 2017 school performance framework. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Monet, the Turnaround Support Manager.
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning. CDE has been a partner in the school's turnaround efforts for the past 4 years. Through this partnership, I was able to attend the University of Virginia program alongside the district. In 2017, the school was awarded the Tiered Intervention Grant. This is a federal grant designed to support persistently low-performing schools. CDE provided feedback and technical assistance on early drafts of the management plan, school turnaround strategies, grant opportunities, and the Unified Improvement Plan. Commissioner Anthus took a tour of the school in January of 2018 and met with district leadership. CDE evaluated the school's management plan and found that it contained components, if implemented well, can result in rapid improvement in student achievement. The partnership with the University of Virginia and Relay will provide targeted professional development and ongoing accountability to continue promising strategies that have already begun. However, if large gains in student achievement and growth are not seen between now and the 2019 school performance frameworks, the department would recommend a reevaluation of the plan as additional or different actions may be needed. I will now pass it back to Brenda to discuss the State Review Panel recommendation.
In their May 2017 site visit, the State Review Panel, after that, concluded that external management for Minot Elementary School was the best pathway, their rationale being that the school did lack strong leadership and personnel capacity, and they found that they rated the school effective in the readiness and apparent capacity of the school to engage productively with and benefit from the assistance provided by an external partner. And there's a more detailed rubric as well as a 2-page summary in your board materials from the State Review Panel. So in conclusion, the State Review Panel did recommend external management. The district is here today to talk about their proposal for management as well, and you will hear from them following us. And then it is up to the State Board to choose from any of the 4 pathways. The next steps are, and Commissioner Anthus talked about this briefly in her remarks, is that we will continue to provide progress monitoring through our Turnaround Support Manager and through the grants that the school has received, and we will provide annual updates to the State Board following this presentation, or today's hearing. Thank you.
I think that concludes the CDE portion of the presentation.
Thank you. So at this time, we would ask that Montezuma Cortez RE1 district representatives introduce themselves for the record and then begin their presentation on behalf of Minot Elementary School.
Thank you, Chairwoman Schroeder, members of the board, and Commissioner Anthons. My name is Lori Halkness, and I'm the superintendent of Montezuma Cortez School District and have served the district in multiple positions for the last 25 years. I would like to take a moment and introduce the members of my team that are here today. Sherry Wright, who's chairwoman of our school board, and Carol Mahasey, director of school improvement. I would also like to acknowledge Donita Jones, who is present in the audience today, who has been the current principal of Minot Elementary and will be retiring at the end of the school year. I wanted to start with why we're here, our students at Minot. I worked at Minot many years ago when I first came to the district, and the students at Minot had continued to be in my heart as I moved to central office and ultimately in the current role of superintendent. I am personally committed to ensuring our students will receive the best education and ensuring the right pathway for Minot in order to provide that education. I also wanted to share Minot's mission and values. The mission and pride values define the school and our expectations for staff and students. These values serve as the foundation for the whole school redesign that staff began implementing this year. Minot has also implemented school-wide systems and supports to enact these values, and these have resulted in a 45% reduction in suspensions compared to the last year. I want to share with you a little more about Mana's students and community. Mana is privileged to serve the most diverse group of students in our district, including a high percentage of Native American students, a high percentage of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and a highly mobile student population. As superintendent, I have seen the impact that poverty has had in our community and our students. However, I know that demographics do not define destiny, and I firmly believe that the education is the key to breaking the cycle so often associated to poverty. Our purpose as a district and as a school is to give our students the education they need to reach their potential, regardless of their background. This is an overview of Mana's achievement data in language arts and math on CMAS for the past 3 years. Our data is not where it needs to be for our students. Over 3-year achievement in language arts and math places Mana in the lowest 5% in the state. I am deeply concerned, as well as everyone on our team and the leadership and staff in Mana are greatly concerned by this performance also. Do you want to switch it? We know we need to attain a higher level than typical growth in order to catch our students up and address this achievement gap. However, we have not yet attained those levels of growth. Accelerating our students' growth in order to improve our students' achievement is our top priority as a school and as a district. We know that the status quo is not acceptable. We can and must do better for our students. We will do better. That is my commitment to you, and most importantly, that is my commitment to our students and families at Mana. Now I'd like to turn it over to Carol Mahasey, Director of School Improvement, to talk about Mana redesign and turnaround efforts. Carol?
Thank you, Superintendent Hockness. Thank you, Chairwoman Schroeder, and members of the board, and Commissioner Anthus, for giving us the opportunity to share more information about the Mana Pathway Plan. To achieve our mission and ensure we are giving our students the education they deserve, we needed to look deeply at why Mana's performance continues to be so persistently low. Working with the Mana leadership team and our UVA partners, we dug deeper into our root cause analysis than we have previously and identified and faced some uncomfortable truths. First and foremost, we recognized that we needed to change Mana's culture to ensure consistently high expectations for leadership, staff, and students. We know our students can rise to meet these expectations if we provide them with the right supports. In order to provide our students with this culture of high expectations and with these right supports, we know we need to develop and support our teachers. Mana has traditionally had high levels of teacher turnover and has often hired teachers with less experience, making it even more critical that we have a strong system in place for coaching and supporting our teachers. Previously, Mana has not consistently and effectively supported teachers with high-quality observation and coaching and effective professional learning communities and data teams. This was a top priority when we began the redesign with the school. Our goal was to move from limited observation and coaching to weekly targeted coaching and support for all teachers. This is a dramatic increase from past years where observation and coaching primarily occurred around the state evaluation cycle. This slide provides a little more detail on the redesign plan that Mana began implementing in 2017-18. This redesign plan forms the basis for many key elements of our Pathways plan as well. After digging into Mana's performance data and root causes, we made a decision to completely restart Mana's culture and academic programming and rebuild from the ground up. We worked with the Mana leadership, staff, and parents, and created a redesign plan which the school began implementing in 2017-18. We identified 4 core areas aligned to turnaround best practices in which Mana needed dramatic change. For each of these, we conducted site visits with high-performing, high-poverty schools across the state, sat with their leadership teams and their teachers, and really sought to learn what are they doing that's making a difference for kids that are similar to ours, and then which of those practices could we adopt in Cortez for Mana's Pathway Plan. The key priorities for 2017-18 implementation included, number 1, resetting the whole school expectations and creating a positive culture of high expectations. Number 2, dramatically increasing the frequency and quality of observation, coaching, and support for teachers. And number 3, rebuilding key instructional systems to support teachers in planning, using data to drive instruction, and identifying strategies for increasing rigor and real-time monitoring of student learning. This has included providing teachers with significant professional development and resources for lesson planning and backwards planning, facilitating weekly data meetings with teachers, and looking at real-time data from formative assessments. Again, this represents a dramatic difference from previous practice in that it provides significantly more support to teachers in the form of personalized coaching, professional development, and facilitation of weekly data meetings. This next slide provides a brief overview of the key elements that UVA uses to evaluate our progress and turnaround and to provide coaching and direction to our improvement efforts. Manaa had a UVA site visit in February to monitor the progress of the redesign implementation and to provide direction to our pathway plan development and submission. This site visit noted several areas of early success, some areas of progress, and some areas of continued challenge that we need to focus on. Manaa's early successes included strong improvements in student culture and discipline, and significant resources being devoted to changing the support and coaching for teachers. The 2 areas that were identified for significant continued focus as we move into our pathways plan included, number 1, instructional infrastructure, and this included things like improving teacher planning and ability to consistently provide rigorous grade level instruction and to identify effective strategies to catch up students who are significantly behind. The second area that was identified for significant focus is talent management, recruiting, developing, and retaining effective teachers. As I mentioned, Manaa has traditionally experienced high levels of teacher turnover with an average of 40% turnover over the past 5 years. We are anticipating a high level of turnover this year as well. This is due in part to the turnaround, with many teachers leaving voluntarily as a result of the significant shifts in expectations. Recruiting and retaining effective teachers and leaders for Manaa is the top priority of the district. The district is implementing several priority hiring strategies, including identifying and doing targeted recruiting with effective educators who have left the district for other districts, and exploring with the board the potential of offering a turnaround stipend to attract and retain effective teachers to Manaa. As mentioned earlier, the current principal at Manaa, Danita Jones, is retiring at the end of this year. We are thankful to Ms. Jones for her years of service. The district has currently posted the principal position and is in the process of screening potential candidates using our UVA Turnaround Leader principal rubric, and we are working very closely with our UVA partners in the identification and selection of the next principal. The district will continue to invest in whoever is selected for leadership from Manaa through the intensive support and oversight that is outlined in this pathway plan. The district has been monitoring the implementation of the Manaa redesign this year to determine the impact on the key levers of turnaround that we just shared with you from UVA. We know that a culture of high expectations and positive student engagement is foundational to turnaround in performance, and this was a key focus of this year. As you can see, this is the area of Manaa's greatest success to date with this turnaround. Office referrals have been reduced by 33%, and out-of-school suspensions have been reduced by 45% over last year. This means we're keeping students in class and engaged, and we are minimizing the disruption to the learning environment. This reduction in disciplinary incidents has also allowed administrators and teachers to focus their precious time on improving instruction. We know that improving Manaa's culture is necessary, but not sufficient to a successful turnaround. We know we have to improve the rigor of Tier 1 instruction, and we have to improve student growth, and we have to improve student achievement in order to be successful in this effort. The district is also monitoring the impact of the redesign implementation on academic performance. Unfortunately, we don't have any definitive data at this point given the timing of key tests and the availability of results. However, the district has analyzed our end-of-year STAR data from Manaa for 17-18 using a national study that correlated STAR scores to predicted PARCC proficiency bands. The intention of this analysis was to get a sense of what impact Manaa's efforts may have had this year on student achievement. Again, this is not conclusive, but we wanted to share this analysis with the state board. So this slide might be a little confusing, so I'm going to take a minute just to walk through what it represents. So the 3 bar graphs on the left-hand side of the slide are the past 3 years of Manaa's actual CMAS results in language arts. The larger bar graph on the right side of the slide is the analysis of Manaz STAR scores for this year and the predicted correlations to PARCC performance. Again, this was completed by taking individual students' STAR scores and correlating them to their predicted PARCC proficiency band based on this national study. This is in no way conclusive, but we hope that it provides an early indicator of the impact of the Manaz redesign on student achievement. If these predictions hold true with Manaz actual CMAS scores, this would indicate that there has been improvement in the percentage of students scoring in the lowest proficiency band on PARCC by up to 10% and increasing the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations by up to 7%. However, even if this prediction comes to pass in our scores, we know we still have significant work to do with our students to make sure that we're growing and achieving at the levels that our students deserve. This slide shows the same analysis as the previous slide, but shows predicted performance in math. Again, similar to the previous slide, the 3 bar graphs on the left-hand side of the slide show Manaz actual CMAS performance for the last 3 years in math, and the bar graph on the right shows the analysis of current STAR scores in math to predicted proficiency bands in PARCC. When the school's leadership kicked off the redesign in the fall of 2017, the team adopted this mantra: we can, we will, end of story. This captures the spirit of the turnaround and the commitment and effort that we know are necessary to achieve the results we know Manaz students deserve. Now I would like to turn the presentation back over to Superintendent Harkness to talk about the selection of the pathway management partner from Manaz.
Thank you, Carol. The district took the process of selecting a pathway for Manaz very seriously and considered each of the statutory pathway options in depth. First, we considered the option of converting Manaz to a charter school. The district is open to partnerships with proven charter turnaround partners. The district currently authorizes 3 charters, but none of them have the capacity or interest in taking on a turnaround school. We also do not have any viable external turnaround charter partners interested in taking over Manaz at this time. The district also analyzed closure as an option, and after much deliberation, we determined it was not feasible at this time due to the lack of available space in other schools in the district to enroll our Manaz students. If the district were to consider closure in the future, it would require some degree of reorganization that would impact other schools. I would not make this recommendation to the board without significant public engagement and community conversations to better understand the impact of this on both the Manaz students and other schools. Based on this analysis, I recommended and the board selected external management because the district has seen success with this strategy in our partnership with UVA, including the district moving off the clock and the majority of the schools improving accreditation levels. One question that our colleagues at CDE has pushed us on as we consider developing this pathway plan is, what will be different in your partnership with UVA that will drive accelerated improvements at Manaz? That is a good question, and we have worked diligently with CDE and with our partners at UVA and Relay to develop a pathway plan that we believe will go much deeper in its intensity of oversight and accountability and its focus on deep instructional redesign implementation that is tailored specifically to the Manaz pathway plan. As we'll discuss more in detail later in the presentation, this pathway plan provides monthly intensive oversight from UVA coupled with bi-weekly in-depth instructional coaching provided by Relay for the Manaz leaders. This oversight and coaching will focus on implementing the key pieces of the instructional infrastructure recommended from UVA based on the root causes identified. This proposed pathway plan will also include quarterly multi-day site visits to provide in-depth accountability to the implementation of the plan and progress monitoring the impact. This is different in several key ways. First, we are moving from a cohort-based training model where Manaz staff have participated in UVA cohort training and Relay cohort training to a model where the training and support are based on evidence on best turnaround practices, but fully customized and targeted to the success of the implementation of Manaz pathway plan. Secondly, This plan deepens the role of UVA as the external management partner in providing accountability and direction to the district in key areas ranging from principal selection and evaluation of the curriculum and instruction. We recognize that UVA has a demonstrated track record of evidence-based practice informing their recommendations as we commit to their recommendations as we implement that plan. So why did the district board select UVA as the external management partner for the Mana's Pathway Plan? There are 3 simple reasons. UVA has a proven track record of effective turnaround partnerships in schools and districts across the country, including schools and districts in Farmington and Gallup, New Mexico, that share many of Mana's characteristics. Secondly, we have enhanced improvements in achievement and accreditation as a district result of our partnership with UVA. Specifically, the district developed a state board-approved pathway plan with UVA as the external management organization, and the district was able to move off the clock after 7 years. In addition, we have seen success in our schools. Kemper Elementary has improved from turnaround to improvement, moving off the clock after 5 years. Mesa Elementary improved from turnaround to priority improvement, only 1.2% away from improvement, and we anticipate Mesa coming off the clock this year. Cortez Middle School and Montezuma Cortez High School also both improved their accreditation status. Finally, the district and our schools have been in the process of aligning our infrastructure and resources to better implement UVA's proven turnaround strategies for the past 3 years and have seen success. Both the board and I felt that moving in a different direction would undermine the overall improvement efforts in the district, which are showing success. As I previously shared, the board has selected the University of Virginia to be Mana's external management partner, which means they will provide the primary oversight and accountability to Mana in successfully implementing this pathway plan. The board and UVA have also invited Relay to serve as a secondary support partner to provide intensive, bi-weekly instructional coaching for the school leadership to successfully implement the instructional practices in planning, teacher coaching, and data-driven instruction associated to the pathway plan and identified with UVA as part of the root cause analysis. UVA was selected based on their track record of success in helping schools and districts build sustainable leadership and systems for effective turnaround using the UVA evidence-based turnaround rubric. Relay was selected based on their proven track record of providing deep coaching on effective implementation of instructional leadership practices. UVA, Relay, and the district leadership team will serve as a core team that will meet regularly to monitor the progress at Mana, guide implementation of the Pathways Plan, and ensure adequate support and oversight are in place. UVA is the external management partner and is ultimately responsible for providing direction to the district, Relay partners, and the Mana leadership team. As previously stated, the district is committed to following the guidance provided by UVA. This timeline shows the depth of support and accountability that we are putting in place for Mana through the Pathway Plan. As I previously shared, UVA, Relay, and the district will be providing intensive oversight, accountability, and support to Mana next year in a way that is based on evidence-based turnaround practices and completely tailored to Mana's pathway plan and context. This slide provides a summary of the Mana performance targets in the pathway plan. The performance targets represent ambitious achievement goals and the growth that Mana needs to attain to reach those achievement goals. When Mana reaches these targets, we are confident that they will be successfully off the clock. However, similar to our district goals, these goals represent the floor for achievement and not the ceiling. And we are committed to ensuring all students are growing and achieving at high levels. We can, we will, end of story. Here are some more pictures of our Mana students. They are the reason why we are here and that we continue to strive for excellence. Now I'd like to introduce Sherry Wright, our board president, to talk about the board commitment.
Thank you,
Chairman Schroeder, and members of the board. I wanted to speak to our board's commitment of this pathway plan. The board spent significant time exploring the pathways planning option in multiple work sessions with the superintendent and the team. In the end, the board selected management pathway as being the most likely to improve Manaw's achievement, and there was a unanimous vote by the board to support this option. The board is 100% committed to ensuring the Manaw students get the education they deserve. We are committing significant resources to the redesign and supporting our leaders and teachers. However, the board is also committed to closely monitoring the progress and to making whatever decision is necessary to support our student success. We will be monitoring Manaw's progress on a quarterly basis and be receiving regular updates from UVA and the district on this process. If Manaw does not make significant gains in growth and achievement by the 2019 school year, then the board will consider other options for ensuring that we are educating our students. The district has considered school closure and will consider it again if necessary for the education of Manaw students. However, we will not consider closure as an option without significant community engagement, effort to better understand and the impact of such a decision on both the students and other schools and the community at large. This slide represents the commitment outlined in the contract with UVA, which significantly deepens our work with UVA. Unfortunately, our partners at UVA could not be present, but they have provided a letter of support, which we have provided to the board. This slide represents the commitment of our supplementary support partner of Relay. We want to end with a picture of a few of our recent Manaw alumni that graduated from high school last year. Our district has recently started a graduation walk where graduates return to their elementary schools and middle schools and walk through the halls to the cheers of current students. It is a way to acknowledge the teachers, the school, and that contributed to their journey, and to engage the younger students in a vision of graduation. In the end, that this is our vision and our purpose, that all Manaw students will leave Manaw with the skills and the knowledge that they need to be successful in high school and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, the State Board will engage in a discussion and ask questions of the district, department, or legal counsel. Based on the board's revised 2017 procedures for the State Board accountability actions, this is our only time for discussion, our only opportunity to ask clarifying questions over the next hour and a half. We need to be sure to be clear with the direction and conditions that we request to include in the proposed written final determination, as public testimony will not be heard next month. So could we begin with questions, perhaps at this end of the table? Board Member Goff? Questions, comments, concerns?
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the past years of work and dedication, and today in particular for making the drive to come up here. We really do appreciate what that takes. Appreciate it. I'm going to try to just start off by talking about some general culture, the culture word, and ask you what is that? Talk to me about your interpretation, your use, application of the word culture. And I assume and understand that part of that is a culture of learning. So we have the focus on academics, we have the focus on habits and attributes that contribute to that in the best way. Is there another facet? Are there other facets involved in that? And how do you feel they will be addressed? How have they been addressed? Has the other side of culture impacted the improvements in your other schools? And how do you see that being possible for Manaw?
I would like to address that at the district level, and then I will have Carol Mahasey address that, because that's been specific target of the Mana's redesign. When we really had to be thoughtful and really identifying and, basically what are our challenges and what are our assumptions as a district in order to move it forward. It really came down to what do we truly want for our students, and that includes all of our students in the district. And it's the culture of, you always hear the buzz, the culture of high expectations, but it's really a culture of success. So that our students do leave our high school, which is our ultimate goal, with not only the skill, but with the vision of what they truly want to be in moving forward. So as you see with the graduation walk picture that we have before you, this is the very first year that we did that, and I have to say it's highly successful, and we're having 3 times the amount of graduates that are participating this year. Really, we had to start saying we do have scholars, and we have a culture of students not only will, if they will graduate, but they will graduate, and then what is their pathway after they graduate. And so we've really had to work upon our culture as a district, and that not only as a district, but also basically driving it with our community too. So, so it's that every student can achieve, that your zip code does not define who you are, and what is the district going to do to support you with that. And so Carol, would you talk about Mana's?
Sure. So when we engaged in the cultural aspects of the redesign, we were really looking at what are the shared values, the shared beliefs, and the shared expectations that need to be put explicitly in place for the school. And I emphasize explicitly because often culture is implicit, and we assume that everyone believes the same things or everyone is holding the same expectations. But if we don't explicitly define those as a school community, then we're never going to be able to put systems in place to reinforce them and hold ourselves accountable to those systems, and also use those as part of our criteria for attracting and developing staff, which we talked about earlier. And so a big thing was, first of all, defining those values and those expectations explicitly. You saw earlier in the presentation the Mana Pride values, and those speak to some of the key things that Superintendent Hockness was just speaking to, which is an explicit and defined belief that all kids can and will achieve if they receive the right supports, and it's our job to provide those supports. And with that goes the growth mindset, and so perseverance is the P in pride, and the way the team has defined that is we haven't achieved this yet, but we will. And that's important for both the staff and for the kids. So when we have kids that are multiple years behind, they may have internalized a sense of struggle, and we want them to see that they haven't reached it yet, but they will, and we will support them in getting there. So that's just one example of one of the values. I think the other piece, in addition to explicitly defining those shared beliefs, values, and expectations, is we have to put systems in place to both positively promote those cultural expectations for the school, and also to hold people accountable to fulfilling those shared cultural expectations and values. As you mentioned, many of the values and expectations relate to student engagement and student achievement, and then others of them relate more to some of the soft cultural elements of diversity and celebrating our diversity as an asset, treating each other with respect, having integrity. That's the I in pride of doing the right thing even when no one's watching, which we've been focusing on with the students. So some of the systems that have been put in place to support this is school-wide expectations, which were included in your packet for the proposal for all common areas as well as the classrooms. They implemented a school-wide positive behavioral system, clip up, clip down, to create consistent expectations across classrooms and to support students in reaching those expectations. And that has also helped with some of the disciplinary referrals. And then we've also implemented monthly pride meetings, which recognize students for living these values at each of the grades. We invite the parents. They get to come celebrate with the students as well. So that's been a visible way to celebrate and acknowledge individuals who are showing the values that are expected. So those are just a few of the systems that we've put in place. So I think it's important to, once again, clearly define common values, beliefs, and expectations, provide support for people, both adults and students, in reaching those values and expectations, and then systems for accountability if for some reason those are not being addressed. Thank you.
Great. In learning about, and very much appreciating, by the way, your the demographics not only of the district but of Mana in particular, the Ute tribe population personal, I just find it fascinating. I think Colorado is extremely lucky that we have the opportunities to do that. But also the significant population of Latino children and white and others. You have Asian Americans as well. But particularly thinking about culture, have you been able to take advantage of the chance to, you talk about diversity and teaching about diversity and how we as a society and in a school community work with that and benefit from it. How have you noticed that in your cultural mind shift, there has been a definite sign of contribution by those groups? And then kind of adjunct to that, where have your parent community been? What's the level of presence or engagement and their own feeling of fulfillment as far as being able to offer a contribution to that? I'm thinking culture today in the sense of people and all the various roles and parts that people play in setting an outlook, a perspective for their peers and themselves. So just examples or wonderful activities. I love seeing the pictures of the young students in their native garb and respecting those traditions. I just wonder if that's going to become an asset for you as you move through this as well.
And I think last year I went on record saying that our diversity is our strength. And it's also our challenge in how do we reach our culture of our students. With our Latino population, I can tell you that Maná does celebrate Cinco de Mayo and had a very large community fundraising run to celebrate the diversity of it. The Mountain Ute tribal members, which are our students, we actually work very, very closely with the tribe. We actually have monthly meetings, and I know that Maná Elementary reaches out on a daily basis because we have liaisons both at the district level but also at the tribal level to work with our students. In the answer of how do we incorporate the parents to be part of the school, that takes a very conscientious effort, quite frankly, because some of our Mountain Ute tribal parents are multi-generation in the district, and there's history there to, quite frankly, that they did not have a positive experience when they too went through our school system. And so it takes a very close working relationship with our parents in order to establish that relationship of trust. And so I do know that Maná has made a very conscientious effort. They had actually at their parent-teacher conferences over 80% attendance, which is a very large improvement for the school. That's also been a focus that we have had as a district is what do we need to do to change to make our schools more welcoming and appealing to all of our parents, quite frankly. And so in answer to our Latino, we always make sure that we have interpreters, quite frankly. We are not hesitant to do home visits to try to get the parents incorporated into the presence of our schools, because really it takes a partnership in moving our district forward. It takes a partnership with the district, having our clear, since we're talking about culture, our clear values, but working with the community, but also working with our parents.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Board Member Sheffield, do you have comments?
Thank you so much for coming, and thanks for the great presentation. I have 3 questions, mostly around curriculum and coaching. I think we all know the value of great teachers using the instructional minutes of the day to great effect. And so I just have a couple questions around that. First, how are your teachers responding to the embedded coaching approach? Just kind of looking at the Pathways Oversight timeline, and I see that, I think biweekly coaching can be really effective, especially if it's embedded right during the instructional minutes and it's not some kind of a meeting later. It's like right in the classroom in real time with kids. Can you respond to that? How do the teachers receive that?
Sure. So, as you probably heard from our presentation and saw from the Pathways proposal, this was a significant shift in practice. So I think this was something that we've been hearing from teachers that they were wanting and requesting. And it was also quite a difference to suddenly have that level of presence in your room and that level of feedback. So I think there was mixed responses. I think people were generally very grateful, and I think there was a point probably midway through the year where people started to feel a little bit overwhelmed. So I think one of the key things for this to be successful is that we need to make sure that the feedback, to your point, is embedded in real time, and that it's bite-sized, and that we stay focused on the same kind of high-leverage action step for a teacher until they've had a chance to experience some success. So we've worked really hard on trying to align the instructional coaching in the building so that it's developmental in the way it helps teachers develop and get better faster using a research-based framework, and that it's also bite-sized and focused so that they're not getting 5 or 10 different things to focus on, but they're really getting one high-leverage thing and then targeted support to implement that and to achieve some success.
Right, great. Yeah, it's such a great leverage point there. If you can get the right mix with the teachers and the coaches, and if there's a good relationship, trust, and also just wonderful examples of great teaching. So it's good. Question about your curriculum. The Success for All program, if we look at this, the Institute for Education Sciences website, What Works, they've done a nice job, I think, of doing meta-analyses of what curricula have the highest likelihood of success. We know that great teachers can take just about any curriculum and really make it work if they know their content well. But this approach, I think, has had some mixed reviews. The language on the website says positive effects on reading fluency, mixed effects on comprehension and general reading achievement for students grades K through 4. So I would say that since you're trying to address overall reading achievement, and K through 4 is so important because it predicts everything later, how are you filling some of those gaps? Are you finding that the case with your students, especially with the EL population, with the language needs that you have to address in vocabulary and so forth? How are you dealing with that?
I would like to answer that, as this is actually a district conversation, because Success for All is our district elementary program that supports our instruction. Our district was known for many years that we would try something for 2 or 3 years and it didn't work, and then we would just shift to something else. So we really didn't take a lot of time to do a program evaluation. In fact, our textbook adoption isn't even called a textbook adoption, it's a program evaluation. How is the program supporting the teaching to the standards, but also with our student population? So last year we did an analysis on Success for All, and you are correct, there are some significant gaps within the context of Success for All, but what we chose to do as a district is to address those gaps within the context of the framework of Success for All, and keep the program itself, keep the fidelity to the program, but what do we, as you know, good instruction is, what do we interface on the weaknesses of the program? And so that's how we're actually addressing that. We also have the reading instructional coaches within the context of the schools that have worked on the district-wide framework for that to address the deficiencies. Because as you know, with any program, we're going to have deficiencies compared to what our needs in the districts are.
Right, so in terms of reading comprehension, are you focusing on vocabulary, or maybe that's too detailed, but I'm just wondering how, because that's one of the main gaps, and that would really help your scores.
Right.
Are you,
and vocabulary across the board for our population is a concern, and so we actually have some specific vocabulary lists, things like that, that we address in the teaching of the classrooms. So vocabulary is a huge one. As you know, fluency is a very large one, which is, you know, one of the areas that we are having to supplement and moving into the well-rounded instruction. With Success for All, too, is actually the students are leveled according to group, but then there's very aggressive progress monitoring within the context of that group. So depending on where the students' needs are with the progress monitoring, then that's what the level of instruction that they have. So it may be vocabulary, it may be fluency at a higher level, and so the key to this, which is quite frankly something we are working very closely on, is how do we keep that aggressive monitoring in place and the shifting of the students, and so they're constantly changing according to where their needs are with the reading instruction.
right, okay.
And I would just add one thing, which is we're also looking at how to strategically utilize the rest of the day outside of the dedicated SFA block to address some of those gaps. So one thing is really having teachers look at curriculum mapping and looking at how to utilize SFA to the best of its ability given how it's structured, and then to fill in the gaps that may be identified through a daily literacy instruction block, intervention, and other things like that, looking at common vocabulary across subjects, opportunities to better integrate nonfiction texts and things like that into social studies and science and writing and those types of things. So really looking at the day as a whole and trying to make sure that we have a clear plan for developing language, developing vocabulary, and helping students throughout the day.
A little more time, yeah.
Yeah.
One final question, can you speak to how effective Engage New York math is? I think some states have had preliminarily good results, and you shared some data suggesting that your projected results could look good in math. But can you speak to that curriculum? How well you think it's working? Again, gaps that have been identified by some states.
There's some challenges that we've had with Engage New York. Part of it is whenever we did the curriculum mapping for Engage, the Engage modules are based on over a 200-day calendar, and currently we have 179 days within the context of our calendar. So we've really had to condense some modules. And so as a district, we did the curriculum mapping, but what's coming out of it now, which is very exciting, quite frankly, is the schools are actually taking that and then creating their own maps of what they see, which, as you know, is very, very deep, intensive work. And so when Carol was talking about the reading, they're also doing that for the math within the context of the specific elementary schools. It's a challenge. What we're finding with our teachers is math is very difficult to teach, and we're having to push in a lot of support, because if they don't feel comfortable in teaching it, then obviously it's hard to teach the students. And so the Engage New York modules are nice because it helps lay out how to teach it, but we've had to push in a math instructional coach to also assist. And I have to say our scores in math are far from where they need to be.
And are your coaches, you have math coaches and literacy coaches, so they have specialties in these areas?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, appreciate it.
Board Member McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for making the drive, including your outgoing principal. Thank you for being here. I wanted to touch on the importance of that role. And I know sometimes when there's a search for an executive level leader, some local governments, for example, will utilize the services of an executive search firm. I know that it's already a challenge to fill all of the positions that you want to fill with the very best personnel that you can. Can you touch on the strategy to find the right person for this pivotal role? And is there any input or strategizing or guidance from either UVA or Relay in this process?
And I too would like to acknowledge, Mrs. Jones' dedication to not only Manaa Elementary, but to the dedication to the district for many, many years. We have already been in contact with UVA when we realized that there was going to be an administrative change at Manaa, and quite frankly, having them weigh in as our external partner, but also the planning process. As Commissioner Anthons referenced, when we also are losing another outstanding principal from Mesa Elementary, who is retiring too, we really had to be thoughtful in what specifically are the needs of each individual school. So I'm going to use a little bit of the path that we use for Mesa in answering your question for Manaa. So Mesa, under Carol Mahacey's guidance, created what's called the Mesa Way, and that's where their mission and their pride values are within the context of what's best for Mesa. Culture is obviously one of the very strong components that they're looking at, as well as an instructional leader. So in doing that and having the staff identify and define what that looks like, then we created, a profile of what we were looking for. When we look at the context of principals, we also look at the principal competencies too for turnaround, because just because they're a good principal, it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful in our district. And we also go through the behavior inventories too. So with Mesa's selection, did take 3 months, but the reason why it also took 3 months is we had 3 different levels of basically benchmarking for our principals. And so it came down to 2 specific finalists, and then we determined which one was the correct one. And that's one thing I have learned over the years is you have to be very careful and select the right principal that can move the school forward from where it currently is. So we will be working very closely with UVA from our conference call on Monday, but then we do have a process. Now, obviously, due to the timing of it, this process will be accelerated because we want to get this principal on board so we can start working with them.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful insight. And I do recognize and respect that this is a local decision, the hiring of a principal that falls under the discretion of the superintendent's office. But because it is such a critical and pivotal role, I'm curious to know how the outreach is. Are you looking at mostly a Colorado search so that the person can understand the unique needs of Manon? Or is this a nationwide search, and how are you making sure that you're achieving the outreach to give you the best possible pool?
I was just going to say, I think as Superintendent Hockness was saying, our biggest criteria is we really want someone that has an experience understanding of the turnaround context and ideally has experience working with high poverty schools and understands how to pull the levers in those contexts in order to be successful. And so we've tried to work through a network of networks. And really, so a couple things. One was we really needed to hone our value proposition and our messaging so that we can attract the people that will understand the context and will provide the competencies that we're looking for, and then use that through our network of networks. So for example, UVA is working across the country, and several of their consultants are also involved in specific turnaround leadership development programs. So getting it out through that personal network we found is helpful in actually inciting interest because it's coming from a trusted source. Hopefully we have a targeted message that reflects authentically who we are and what our needs are and what we're looking for. And so that has generated some interest in the past. We also do, targeted ad buys and social media campaigns, again, with those similar messaging. And we are also doing, similar to our teacher pipeline efforts, we recognize that for a lot of reasons, we have struggled in the past to attract external folks and to retain them. And so we are also simultaneously working on an Aspiring Leaders program with UVA that will take the turnaround competencies that we've been training our principals on and identify emerging leaders that might be, 1 or 2 years out from the principalship, have identified an interest in that, and then providing them with targeted support and coaching around the turnaround competencies to be able to hopefully in the future assume a leadership role. We did have 9 folks participate in that program this year, including 3 sitting assistant principals in our district.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
And that is one strategic change that I recommended to the board and the board approved was that traditionally in our elementary schools we've had dean of students, which has basically been a certified teacher. And this year we are converting all this dean of students into assistant principals, so that will also help with our pipeline.
Thank you. Board Member Rankin.
I also would like to address the academics. That's where we are going to gain in our test scores. But I'd like to go back to Ms. Mahesny. In your report, you mentioned that the trips to the office by naughty students has decreased. I'm concerned about if they're not going to the office and they're staying in the classroom, might that be disruptive to the academic teaching? Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. No, I think that's a really good question, something that we were very thoughtful about. We had 2 goals. One was to keep students engaged and provide them with the supports that they needed to be successful in the classroom. And the second was to minimize disruption to the learning environment, which includes the classroom, but it also included the time that was being taken by administrative staff away from instructional coaching. So what we did was a couple different things. One is resetting the school-wide expectations and providing clear and explicit systems in every classroom for early and positive intervention in behaviors has been helpful in just minimizing disruption and helping some of those kids that are maybe at the lower levels of naughtiness, for lack of a better word. And then we've provided an additional behavioral support person that was hired specifically this year through the TIG grant that is available to do a quick pull aside with students if they are then moving to that next level of disruption within the learning environment. They pull them out, they do quick brief interventions. We do talk it through forms, think it through forms, quick behavioral interventions about, okay, so what was going on? How can you go back and be successful? And really trying to minimize their time out of the classroom, but also not allowing them to escalate within the classroom. So that level of support, the Tier 1 school-wide expectations are in place now to minimize that kind of lower level behavior and help incent positive behavior. And then for those kids that are starting to escalate, we have an additional layer of support that pulls them out for a short period of time, provides them with very concrete skill-based work on what was not working for you here, and then how can you go back in and be successful before we then escalate to the level of office referrals, suspensions, that type of thing. So we hope that that both provides the individual students with the support they need to be successful and return to the classroom quickly, but also minimizes, to your point, disruption within the learning environment, both in the classroom and the school as a whole.
Are the teachers also involved in that process? Because I know there can be some that have a higher incidence of sending students to the office. Are they included in some type of professional development to help them with this program?
Yes, so we have the Getting Along Together is a Tier 1 program that's actually associated to the Success for All that provides some of that Tier 1 instruction within the classroom that's delivered concurrently by the teacher, and then we also have a full-time counselor and family liaison that pushes in and supports with that. They all receive training on the school-wide expectations, the Club Up, Club Down, the pride values, and those cultural systems to reinforce the positive behavior. And then we are working to continue to tighten that communication between the behavioral support specialist and the teachers. When there is a student that's of particular concern, there is an MTSS system in place where that group of folks meets to kind of look more holistically at the student. We monitor the data very closely. There's a behavioral support team that meets weekly to look at that. And so if there is a need for additional strategizing, then the teacher definitely gets pulled into that, and we have a broader discussion about, okay, so we've had a similar incident with the same student.
How long has this been in place?
This is all new this year.
I'm sorry?
This is new this year.
Okay.
For 1 year.
Sounds like you're headed in the right direction. Thank you for that. So I was looking at the state review panel recommendation, which I'm sure you've seen too. And it concerns me that behavior has been something you've really focused on, and I applaud you for that. I think sometimes that is a problem, but kind of disturbs me that you have hired a paraprofessional to handle that. I would think even, not just an assistant principal, but somebody that is very trained in that kind of remediation would be better than a paraprofessional. Can you address that, someone?
One of the strategic changes we made at Manaa in looking at the behavioral issues that we have had is the rest of the district has school counselors in place, and so we changed the school counselor out to a master's in social work, a social worker that actually works deeply with this tier of students, because we did see that need. So the para is trained, but the social worker, and we also have a San Juan BOCES who's very instrumental, and they actually do have specialists that we utilize as well as their social workers, but they have a behavioral specialist that comes in and really helps us develop behavioral plans for these specific students.
So am I right to assume that this particular paraprofessional has been handpicked for this specific job and has been trained for it?
Yes, it has a specific job description that goes with that. Carol, is there anything you want to add?
Just to build on what you were saying,
Yeah.
then yes, and that person works very closely with the school social worker and the assistant principal and principal in supervising those daily interventions. And then also, again, there's a broader team that develops the behavior support plans for those students.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more. You talked about a counselor. Let's see if I can get to that part. And I notice, at a time when we're dealing with counselors that address suicide, bullying, that sort of thing, and districts seem to be clamoring for that type of a counselor. I see where you have a counselor that is a social worker, and I think you just addressed that. but they provide support and resources including food, mental health services, laundry, etc. This is quite concerning to me that we can't focus enough on academics because we have all these other challenges that are facing us. Is UVA and Relay, are they tuned into this, and do they have suggestions for how we can address this but really continue to focus on that academic? Can you just talk a little bit about that? We can
Obviously,
move on.
that's a very good question.
I just want to add the piece about Relay. One of the pieces that we work on with school leaders is it's called the Getting Better Faster Guide, and it has two separate trajectories. One is around management and the other is around rigor. And our recommendation to schools is to really focus and make sure management is mastered before they move on to rigor. But depending on the time of the year, they might focus on both. So that is something that is providing support to the teachers of Manaw around that management component.
So then I'm assuming then that counselor is taking care of the social issues so that the teachers don't have to.
That's correct. In fact, Manaw actually has a food bank that they assist. They have backpacks that go home on Friday for some of their students that may need additional food, and the counselor coordinates all of that.
What happens in the summer?
That's something as a district that we have had multiple conversations about, is what happens to our students during the summertime. In fact, if you will note, we are one of the few districts that has a 5-day school week in our area. And part of the concern, quite frankly, when we have talked with teachers and school board is and we were at a 4-day week, and then we strategically went to a 5-day week, is truly what would happen to our students during that additional day home. And so we feel as a district, even though it's not the pattern statewide, it's best for our district to stay at a 5-day week for our students.
Superintendent Hawkins, thank you so much for your leadership. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
My question has to do with online infrastructure. Do you have, is it very good infrastructure that you have for online, for where kids can learn and get computer skills? What is that like? Because I know in other districts that we've asked, they don't, have very good online. Sometimes it goes off and on. And so how is yours?
And when we came before the board last year, we said that this was obviously a challenge. So I'd like us to report on some of the changes we've had this year. It does still be a challenge, but we are addressing it within the context of what we have. In relation to Manaw, Manaw had some of the largest infrastructure issues behind the walls for our internet, and we have addressed those this year. Manaw was also one of our schools in the district that had the least amount of Chromebooks within the context of that. Through fundraising and some creativity within Manaw, they were able to add 2 computer carts, and so we are going to be adding additional computer carts to Manaw as well as the district. So I have to say it is better. It's definitely not where we would like for it to be as far as a very fast broadband. I know the city is looking at trying to address that because it is a community issue. But I do have to say that we have moved forward since last year.
Okay, so when they took the test last year, was the broadband fast enough for taking the test?
We did have some, well, let's just say whenever the state testing happens, and because we went completely computerized, our tech department shuts down. And they are just at call, they are on site at every single school in our district to address any concerns.
Let me just interrupt you, I'm sorry, because I'm going to get at a question. It has to do with research study that I just came across, and it really interested me because, you know, many of our districts do not have, you know, the infrastructure for online, especially since our test is online. I know some people take it paper and pencil. And so this study found out or showed that when kids are poor, when kids don't have the don't have computers at home, and you know they don't have the experience really like, you know, other kids probably would, like, you know, middle class, upper middle class kids do, then they don't do well. What the test is measuring is really the ability of taking of using a computer instead of the skills that are necessary to do well on the test. So my concern when I read this, and I mean, it was just pretty eye-opening, you know, when I saw this, and I just, I know that we need those skills. I know we need those computer skills, and certainly kids need to do that, but suppose, you know, what's happening in your district, that kids are not doing very well because they don't have computers at home, and they are, you know, don't have the facility to do that. So I'm wondering if what the reason for your low grades may be due to computers and not really the knowledge of the test. I know that when we first talked about this, and especially in math, I know that Dr. Scheffel and I were very concerned when we oversaw the test, especially the math test that was so very word-oriented. In other words, it was reading. You were basically doing reading instead of, I think, instead of testing math. And at the time, I said that the math was not beautiful. And I think somebody thought, well, that's not very rational, saying that it's not beautiful. But I was going back to Aristotle, who said beauty is truth and truth is beauty. And I know several members of our here said, well, surely the test, when we first got those results, surely that's not measuring what our kids know. I mean, our kids know more. And on that basis, I said, well, it's not a beautiful test. And I still think it's not a beautiful test because there are so many issues, you know, to be able to tell truth, whether it really is truth, that, you know, you can say, yes, this data is truth. And so I can understand, you know, especially given that you haven't had the infrastructure, but you've been tested. And so you know, my heart goes out to districts such as yours. And I just wondered if you had applied for, well, you did say that the problem was solved in your...
Oh, no, we're addressing it.
You're addressing it.
It's far from being solved.
So, do you take the paper and pencil test?
No, we do the online test. And I think in answer to your question, there's some multiple factors that contribute to that. One, there is accessibility to the computers, which many of our students don't have at home. So their experience that they receive on that is during school. Okay. And so that's why we're trying to get these classroom carts that have a computer for every student. Another factor that we also had too is our instruction isn't where it needs to be.
Right.
And so obviously we need to address that, as you can see from our very aggressive plan that we have. But then the third component is we were really studying with this and looking as a district, you know, where are we with the learning of our students, meaning where are we with our instruction in the classroom? What we also realized too is with our assessments, they weren't rigorous enough or long enough.
I see.
So our students they were actually having test fatigue. So we developed interim assessments that up until this point have been paper and pencil.
Right.
Longer, because our students, quite frankly, because some of their processing is slower, because English is a second language, or quite frankly they don't have a dominant language, which we have a very large group of that, hence why we have to really work on building vocabulary. We really needed to look at that and give our students more exposure to that. Now we are going to be going on to a online automated platform for our interim assessments next year, so they do have the same exposure.
So when you say they don't have a dominant language, I don't know if I...
What we have found is that we have students that come with a dominant language, like for instance Hispanic, and then they come and learn English as a second language. We have many of our students, quite frankly, our Native American tribal members that have a little bit of a Ute background, a little bit of a Navajo background, and a little bit of an English background. And so we really have to deal with that language acquisition with them and basically just building the background vocabulary within the context of our students.
So are you talking about Pidgin?
Excuse
Pidgin
me?
language? Or
No. Yeah.
Right.
Just a vocabulary.
But I
low
think,
vocabulary.
But I think, well, I believe that kids have, even if they're exposed to 3 different languages, they have a dominant language. I mean, kids are amazing as far as what they know and what they understand. And
Students are amazing. I guess the point that I was trying to make was, with some of our students, it takes them longer to finish the test than other students.
Sure.
Just because they have to process it at a slower level to be
Right.
able to comprehend. And
Right.
so I think the online does help address the test fatigue,
Right.
given the paper and pencil points. So,
Well, I'm going to ask something then. One more question. So if the SAT is now giving more time to kids who are bilingual, trilingual, I am just thinking, why not park? I mean, if studies have shown that you need more time, I think we should look into that as a board about giving more time to cases. Yes. Okay.
thank you.
A law was passed last year that if a district is on priority improvement or turnaround, that there's an expectation to do some serious looking into the preschool opportunities for your students. And I know that wasn't required at this time, but have you given that some thought? And do you not think that this could be something that would help with early math, vocabulary, and set up for your
Absolutely. As a district, this is one of the things we've been really looking at, quite frankly, is where our incoming students are coming to kindergarten, and their beginning of the year assessment data has shown that the students are below benchmark. The Mana's data for the kindergarten is 79% of kindergartners at Mana scored well below or below on district at the beginning of the year, compared to 61% of kindergartners overall in the district. 42% of kindergartners at Mana ended the year scoring well below or below, compared to 26% of kindergartners who scored well below or below on DIBELS at the end of the year. What we have seen as we've been looking at our data is our kindergarten teachers have been doing a phenomenal job in moving our students to benchmark with coming in so low. We had another elementary school that participated in the ELAT grant, which I do greatly appreciate. And what they had found was getting our kindergarten students to benchmark is not enough to retain that level of growth in first and second grade, because we were really seeing a dip specifically in second grade, and why was that? So what we have determined is that our students have to be a lot further than where they are on benchmark. They need to be, quite frankly, at the very high side of benchmark by the end of kindergarten. We have a very strong preschool council in the area, which I'm very thankful for, and they work collaboratively together. We do have a district preschool that's a CPP preschool, which we have slots there and also e-care slots, but we also work with our other preschools and give them some of the slots. In fact, we allocated 10 of our preschool slots to the Mountain Ute Tribe preschool. We have been looking at more of a concentrated effort, like as far as a district, could we offer year-round preschool? Because at this time, the preschool only runs during the academic year. And we also have a community group Team Up that has been really looking at the needs of our, basically from cradle to death, but they've really identified the preschool component. So our next phase as we start peeling back the needs is to really identify and look at the preschool options and how can we really ensure that our students coming into kindergarten are higher than they currently are.
That sounds great. Is there well, I don't know what the term for it is, but in Denver there is an evaluation process in terms of what is the curriculum at the various preschools, and they're sort of graded, I would say. Is there something? STAR, thank you.
Yes.
Is there such a thing available?
Qualistar.
Qualistar.
We have Qualistar in our area.
Okay. So that gives you some idea. I mean, I did see on your website that there was a place to apply for preschool, but I wasn't able to learn a whole lot more about the opportunities.
Yeah, we do
for
aggressive
families.
outreach because obviously being CPP, there are specific indicators that need to be met. But we also have started this year with, we had an additional teacher, and so we opened up those slots for tuition-based too.
Do you know what percentage of kids you're turning away for which you don't have an adequate number of scholarships or CPP or whatever other community options to help?
Well, this, within the context of our preschool, I can tell you we have a waiting list at this time of 20. And that's just our preschool, which services roughly 54 slots. So if we look at it community-wide with the number of slots we have, it's far greater than that.
Sure. So that brings me to my second question. In looking at your website, I did see a number of community organizations listed in the periphery, but I wondered, to what degree do you have some community support in light of the fact that you have such tremendously high need for so many of your students and their families? Do you have a organized system that coordinates that? Is it here, there, and everywhere? What's your sense of that?
Team Up coalition that has been created is a year and a half in, has really gone through a very strong needs assessment and program evaluation of our community needs. And this coalition is made up of all of our community partners.
Okay.
And so they are creating a specific system, because one of the things that they had found was, you know, if someone comes to our district that has students, then, you know, we might try to help them through our homeless funds with our homeless liaison. The Pinion Project might, you know, help them in a different way. But how can you do like a one-stop so the families can come, and then we just, you know, maximize the resources that we have. So we are getting there. We're definitely not there yet, but we do have a plan in place.
That's great. Hats off to your community for helping you out. Well, what I learned this year is that our kids spend 20% of their time in school, so I hate to think that we have to spend a lot of time working on the 80%, but we do have to spend some time working on the 80% to support our kids.
We truly do.
Thank you. Tell me about your induction program.
Well, as many things with the district, we've had to analyze it and see what our strengths and weaknesses were, and quite frankly, what we had found was that we really did not have very much of an induction program. We traditionally had the BOCES. BOCES was our state induction program, but as you know, with things changing, their induction program changed too. And as we started defining truly what does it mean to be a teacher in Montezuma-Cortez School District, there's also specific things that the teachers need to be strong in too, as we move the district forward, but also give autonomy within the schools themselves. And so I'm going to let Carol talk a little bit about this, because she's been heading up the committee for the induction on not only recruiting our teachers, but also how do we retain the teachers.
Sure. So a couple of things that we've been looking at. One is providing all new teachers with a mentor so that they have someone in their building that is a more experienced, effective teacher, and that we're training all these mentors in the same type of curriculum so that they can provide effective support to those teachers in understanding the instructional design of the school and navigating that, as well as providing some peer instructional coaching. The other thing we're really looking at
This is centrally decided, right? This is not a school
yes, this
decision?
part is centrally decided.
Okay, thank you.
And in addition to that, we've also had some schools that are kind of leading out ahead and saying, how do we then also supplement that and do some deeper induction and coaching and support at the school level? So we're piloting a couple things. The middle school is piloting learning classrooms and learning labs where they're coupling that with the mentoring and with the instructional coaching that's present in the building so that teachers are kind of led through kind of a scope and sequence of looking at different effective practices in actual live practice, and then debriefing with a coach and a mentor, and then receiving feedback in their own classroom on that. And that's similar to what we're starting to try to do at Minot and at Mesa. I do think that there is still some room to be done in terms of some of the work we're learning from Relay about the Get Better Faster trajectory, and how do we demystify the process of onboarding new teachers, especially with our high turnover and the number of inexperienced teachers that we receive, including alternative licensure teachers. So how do we just really demystify, here's the top 3 things you can do in the first year to really help people be successful, and then how do we align professional development and coaching and these learning lab experiences to those top 3 things, while still, of course, differentiating for individual people's needs as well. We do work heavily with Betcher to provide alternative licensure supports, and they have a very strong program of both selection and support for that first year. So we've tried to partner with them to tag on to some of their mentor training to help augment our mentor training as well. As Superintendent Hockness said, it's definitely still a work in progress, but really trying to define what are the key characteristics that teachers need to be successful in our district, how do we demystify that both for leaders and teachers, and how do we align professional development and coaching so that we can truly help people get better faster.
And
So this
also-
is new then? You really haven't been able to see whether this helps with your retention or not?
As far as having the systemic process in place, this is new. We've had components of it in the past, but we really haven't had a system. Like, for instance, when a teacher hits Tier 2, what we would do is just flood that teacher with support. But it really wasn't a structured support, and quite frankly, one teacher said, "Can you just give me time?" And so what we created, and this was actually a recommendation from UVA, was to create a teacher support plan. What is the area they're struggling in, and who needs to push in and support them? And that's really made it much more effective. So hopefully we'll have Tier 1, Tier 2, and then, Tier 3.
Great. Somewhat related to that, apparently you do an annual teacher perception survey. Can you tell me about this year versus last year, or what information you've gleaned from that you find helpful?
I have to say that the Minot administration went through and, identified and really analyzed all the responses from the TEL survey. Obviously, it was very concerning. And so there was actually specifically a couple of areas that were really, we drew out and just really analyzed, and I know they talked to teachers about specifically why they were so low. And so the first one was the time. Do teachers have enough instructional time to make the changes that they need to have?
I think that was statewide.
Yes, it was. And I do have to say that was the lowest area in our district, too.
Okay.
And what was from that was we have dedicated, we call them seed times, but it's like a data PLC time that teachers have to work collaboratively together. And they felt that they needed that time solely for that specific thing. And what had happened is, because in the context of the calendar, there really wasn't time to meet with the teachers or do specific school professional development. And then, the district pushed in some, like for CMAS training, they needed to train the teachers. And so what available time is there? Well, that's the time we don't have kids. And so that's something that we're going to be looking at for next year. And then on the instructional side, do you want to address that?
Sure. So we did our teacher perception survey in January internally, and then we did the TEL survey more recently. Actually, what we saw that was interesting is In the January survey, we saw some improvements in perception over the prior year around things like principal as instructional leader, the level and amount of coaching that teachers are receiving, and some of the key areas that we had targeted through the redesign, and then saw some slight dips in terms of teacher culture and working conditions having to do with some of the things that Superintendent Hawkins just mentioned with time and expectations. And then we saw some of those same indicators dip when we had the TEL survey. So I think there was a notion of some initial support, as I said earlier, being really well received, and then a sense of a little bit of overwhelm as the year went on with the amount of support that was being provided, coupled with the increasing rigor of the expectations around planning, instruction, some of these school-wide expectations and systems that we were putting in place. So we did see improvement in some of our key targeted indicators in our January survey, and then a slight dip in those, and then some dips in working conditions and teacher culture.
Okay, thank you. One comment. You're teaching Southwest. I would like to confirm that that's a beautiful place to go. Last May, after we were finished with the Cortez hearings and we were set free from our Attorney General to talk, my husband and I took a trip down there. Thank you for a very generous visit. We visited Mesa Elementary School and your staff. You sent us off to a very good restaurant.
Good.
So, hey, I'm happy to confirm that that's a really gorgeous place to go and work and teach.
Part
it's
of
not
our
huge. The traffic's not bad.
No, if it takes
but
more
they
than
do have stoplights, as I recall.
Well, if it takes more than 15 minutes, if on my 5-mile trek into town, I complain. One of our branding tools is that Cortez is one of the most affordable mountain towns in Colorado. So that's part of our branding.
You have a
and trying
beautiful
to
high school.
recruit. So, and I do appreciate you coming down, and I know that it's quite a trip, but we would love to host anyone
it was
coming
definitely
down.
worth it.
We're very proud of the work we're doing and would love to show it to you.
That I can
And
tell.
our students. It's always about our students.
I loved your high school. So my final question, in reading your materials, it looks like you had significant parent community participation in your efforts to build your plan. Do you have a structural piece in order to maintain that engagement from that community? So that, or is it one and done and they only come when they come to see their kids work?
Well, we have the Parent Advisory Council, obviously our school improvement committee. The parents are involved in the redesign and also in the parent meetings. I do have to say that Mana has had quite a few parent committees this last year, and I was able to attend the majority of them, and there's a lot of passion in the room towards Mana. In fact, when, quite frankly, Principal Jones had the last meeting, we were talking about the, basically coming with our pathway plan and the other options for Mana. There was a lot of passion in the room and saying, well, what can we do? And I was very pleased to hear that this following Monday, the parents from that meeting is creating a potluck for all the parents to come and be informed. So I think there is a movement that's starting to happen and move forward, even with the high mobility of Mana. There's been a greater push in communication in newsletters, Facebook, multiple communication venues. And they've been doing instead of doing like a fundraiser to where the students go out and, try to elicit parents in the community to buy certain things out of a catalog and then they get a certain component of it. They've elected to strategically do community events. One was just the celebration of Cinco de Mayo, and they had this fun run around the Mana school, and there was over 100 participants on that this last Saturday. So they're really doing a lot of creative and innovative ways to engage not only the parents but engage the community. Which is very important with Mana moving forward.
And that's the joy of a small community anyway, so good for you. Board Member Flores.
Thank you. I just remembered from years back when, I was working in a very tough community in Houston. It's the Canal Navigation community that was just flooded. I don't know if schools are open there, but there was some poverty. But I remember working for Teacher Corps, and we worked with a teacher. We were being trained, getting our masters, but trained with a teacher, we worked with, of course, our teacher, our university person, and then a counselor. A counselor, of course, the kids had counseling, but the teachers needed counseling as well. So there was a person who listened to teachers about, a psychologist, one of the university faculty would come and, spend some time at the school with teachers. And I'm just wondering if you had that component, whether you might be able to retain more teachers. And also, we had group sessions. You might even call them group therapy sessions, too. And I think that might be, helpful. We did keep the team. I mean, the team was whole when, at least my team was whole when we left, under, some tough conditions. Of course, there were federal monies for Teacher Corps at the time. And all of that, and the University of Houston, which gave incredible support for that. I'm just wondering if we could possibly have something like that. I mean, a component like that for teachers in hard-to-serve schools, because I think that would be very helpful. I mean, I know that insurance is so expensive, and that might be, something that can keep the group together. And if there could be a program like Teacher Corps that could bring people in like that.
That's a really good suggestion. We have our own self-insurance pool, and we are actually adding a counseling component to that for the needs. But I really like your approach on being proactive instead of reactive. Because we're talking about reactive when we talk about, our insurance, but proactive. Because you are correct, and by the number of retirements that you see, these are people we need to keep.
Right.
And that's where I have to say that I do appreciate the rural funding, because we have several teachers that are retiring this year that would have just left the profession, and they are coming back.
Good.
So I do have to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all you do.
Other questions or comments from board members? So at this time, then, the State Board will vote to request the district, with the support of the department, to develop and submit a proposed written final determination for the State Board's consideration. Do I have a motion? Board Member Rankin?
Based on today's hearing, I move that the district, with the support of the department, submit a proposed written final determination regarding external management for the State Board's consideration at the June State Board meeting.
I second it.
Thank you. That's a proper motion. Ms. Cordial, would you be kind enough to call the vote? Are you ready?
Board Member Durham? Yes. Board Member Flores?
Yes.
Board Member Goff?
Yes.
Board Member McClellan?
Yes.
Board Member Rankin?
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle?
Yes.
And Board Member Schroeder?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously.
Thank you. So this concludes today's hearing. The board will vote on this matter at the June meeting. And as a reminder, we are still under the acting in a quasi-judicial role and may not engage in conversations with the district with regard to this final written determination, i.e. you can't go down there now and visit the school. Sorry. It was beautiful in May.
I do appreciate the State Board's support in moving the district forward. So thank each and every one of you, and I do want to extend the invitation when it's appropriate to please come down and visit our district.
It's a great trip.
Thank you.
And I would also
Thank you.
like to acknowledge the support we've had from CDE. They have been invaluable in moving the district forward. So,
Thanks for sharing that, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Best wishes. Break.
Enjoy graduation.
Here's my suggestion, if you all agree, let us take a break until 11:15. I know that some of the folks who want to speak to us are already here, and even though we said public comment 11:30, if you're here and willing and would be willing to speak sooner, that would be great. That would expand the opportunities. A-okay? Thank you. Time for a break, folks. And safe travels back, you guys. It is a long trip.
Thank you.
Beautiful, but long. Each individual is limited to 3 minutes, and Ms. Cordial will let you know when your time is up. We do have a lot of folks signed up, and we're adding a little bit of extra time since we ended the last function early. So if you're offended to be called on before 11:30, just let me know and I'll keep going down the list. If you're here to speak on a topic that has already been addressed, I'd appreciate you state your name, indicate that this has been discussed, and unless you have anything additional to add to it, we will note from the record your reason for attendance today. This will help us make sure everyone has a chance to speak on the various topics. And if we do run out of time, we will have public comment this afternoon, which we expect to begin at about 4:30. Board members will not engage with you in this public comment section, and we cannot accept public comment on quasi-judicial matters, such as what we just completed, the Minot Cortez program. We will not accept public comment on disciplinary matters, counting clock hearings, etc. If you're here to speak about the educator licensing items that we have for hearing tomorrow, there will be a time for public comment tomorrow morning for those particular items in the morning. So if I may start calling folks, Dr. Mary Gromko, please. Oh, you've been here a long time. You're very patient.
Never a problem. In fact, I used to work in this building for 10 years, so very, very used to being here.
Well, welcome back.
Okay, I'm Dr. Mary Gromko, and right now I am the president of the National Science Teachers Association. It's a 3-year commitment. It's an elected position. The 3rd year is called the retiring year, so I'm in my retirement year. But I live in Colorado Springs. I've been a high school teacher, taught high school chemistry for 17 years, and then left to do the supervision type work. And in my traveling the past 3 years, I've been to many, many, many states, in fact, almost all of them, giving keynote addresses and so on. And what I've noticed is Colorado is behind in science, pure and simple. We used to be right up there with the first set of standards in the 90s and the year 2000. We are behind. And these next generation science standards, which have been written and are up for approval, are really on target. Absolutely very well written. The people who wrote them are very, very well versed in what has to be done. It's aligned with workforce skills. We're asking students to not only know the content, but to think outside of the box. And that's very, very important in the 21st century. In science, we've really done a very credible job with science, inquiry, process skills, and so on. But for the 21st century, that's not good enough. We want students to be innovative. We want our nation to be innovative. Because if we're not, we become stagnant. So the next generation science standards are a way to encourage students to become innovative. Think outside of the box. I'll give you one brief example. I was at a school, and when I go to these many states, besides giving keynote addresses, I try to visit as many schools as I can. STEM schools, poverty schools, whatever. One school I did visit, high school physics, juniors, seniors, one young man with cerebral palsy. And in the beginning of the school year, he mentioned that he had never been able to ride a bike because of his deformity with his hands and his feet. So the physics teacher just threw it out there. Why can't we design and build a bicycle for this young man to ride? Now, it's high school physics, right? They're absolutely going to learn about Newton's laws and so on and so forth. But that year, those kids designed using technology. They actually brought bicycle people in to help them make a bicycle, and it had levers. So this young man in physics could ride a bicycle for the first time in his life. Oops, my time is up. Bottom line is approve the standards. Well done. Absolutely vital for the state of Colorado. Thanks.
Thank you. Scott Graham.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board.
Good morning.
I'm here to talk about the science standards as well, from a much more specific viewpoint of the smaller districts of the state. I'm Executive Director of Academic Support Services in the Weld County RE8 School District, which is centered around Fort Lupton. We go out to Dacono near the highway, but pretty much around Fort Lupton. I've been with the district for 22 years, started as a high school science teacher at Fort Lupton High School. And now I run grants and reporting and accreditation, a lot of things like that for my district, as well as I'm the one science administrator at the district level. So I interact with the science standards a lot in my district and interact with the science teachers all the way down to elementary and preschool and their science standards. We found that the science standards in this current iteration are difficult to understand, they're vague, and we have a lot of argument when we get to what we're going to teach. These are experts in the field, and we still are not sure exactly what is expected from the current science standards. We also feel that moving to the next gen standards will help us greatly because they're much more specific, especially with the boundary statements and examples that they have in their in the standards themselves. They say this is what is covered, this is what you can expand upon, but is not necessary. And that is crucial, especially when you get to the upper level around high school. In larger districts, we found that there are committees and teams that get together at the district level that help them with the curriculum and run it. In a smaller district like mine, we don't necessarily have that. We only have me that kind of goes in and tries to settle arguments. And I would greatly appreciate if we had science standards built around the next gen that really get to the heart of it and say, this is what it would mean, this is where we need to go. The other part, I watched the last board meeting that came up was about the implementation and the timeline and the cost. I do agree that the timeline should be spread out a little bit in that I wouldn't expect an 1819 timeline, but a 1920 I think we and most districts could do without too much problem. As far as equipment, I don't believe that there is a major equipment cost. If we're teaching the standards, as most districts are, correctly right now, we might be shifting, we might be moving some of the microscopes from 4th grade to 5th grade, or moving this lab to this different class at the high school. But there's not new equipment necessarily in the implementation of these standards. Yes, there will be some, and that's why I'm asking for a little bit of time for implementation. But really, I think that the whole thing together doesn't look like a huge expense at the district level. In other words, we're much more up for the challenge, and we're excited about the opportunity to move to these more specific standards than we are worried about the cost or the time and equipment. I think that this will be good for vertical, horizontal alignment throughout the district and really levels the playing field for smaller districts and bigger districts and puts us on an even keel so that we are playing even. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Furtak?
Sorry. Good morning.
I have the same problem.
My name is Erin Furtak, and I'm here today in support of the new science education standards as well. I'll state my two claims up front. To remain competitive, Colorado needs to adopt these new standards. And number two, Colorado teachers and schools have the capacity to adopt these new standards. I make these claims as a private citizen drawing on multiple perspectives. I'm currently the chair of the STEM teacher education program at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I'm also associate professor of science education. I have conducted extensive research in metro area schools in the past 10 years that examined the kinds of supports that high school science teachers need as they adopt NGSS-aligned reforms in their classrooms. I'm also a graduate of Jeffco Public Schools, where I was later a science teacher at Wheat Ridge High School, and I'm also the parent of a first grader and a preschooler here in the Denver area. And I'm also currently a member of a committee as part of the National Academies of Sciences, where we're updating recommendations for science laboratories in middle and high schools based on the next generation science standards. And it is from and informed by these multiple perspectives that I strongly state my support for Colorado's adoption of this new set of standards, which currently represent the best state of our field's knowledge about science learning. The next generation science standards have increased the rigor and expectations for science learning in the United States. In order to produce a homegrown workforce, we need to provide our students with science learning experiences based upon the best resources available. Given the large number of states with NGSS-aligned standards already in place, it is clear that educational research, teacher preparation, and instructional resources are all being developed in this direction. We would be doing Colorado students a deliberate disservice by continuing to teach from an outdated set of standards rather than moving toward a research-based, forward-looking vision that will put them in better strategic positions with students from elsewhere in the nation, learning from this more recent set of standards. Colorado has a strong teacher workforce committed to improving the lives of our students. These teachers are curious and motivated learners who are eager for new opportunities and have, in my experience, risen to the occasion when provided with meaningful opportunities to learn about new approaches to science teaching, to improve their classroom teaching strategies, and to try out new teaching materials. These kinds of changes are consistent with what has been shown in research over and over again. When provided with time to work with their colleagues, try out reforms, and science teachers can learn the kinds of teaching strategies that will be necessitated by these new standards. I have worked in long-term partnership with high school science teachers in 2 metro area school districts, with the Southeast BOCES and in 1 Northeastern Colorado school district, and I have seen teachers' curiosity give birth to key changes in their classroom practices, and I've seen positive changes in student achievement. These districts have started moving their professional development programs already in the direction of the NGSS several years ago in order to provide their teachers and students with state-of-the-art learning opportunities. The kind of professional development I'm talking about is embedded in the course of the school day for about an hour and 90 minutes at a time, once every couple of weeks, and the regular teaching schedule. It will not cost a lot of extra money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kent Willman.
Thank you. My name is Kent Wellman. I spent 30-plus years teaching social studies in St. Vrain and currently work at CU Boulder School of Education preparing the next generation of teachers. We have some good ones coming to a school near you. Not enough of them, and certainly not enough candidates of color, but talented and dedicated young people. I've come today to speak against a proposed citizenship test requirement, not because I'm against informed, engaged, and effective citizenry, because I am for those type of citizens. There's a saying in education circles that goes something like this: what's important to learn but difficult to measure gets pushed aside to what is less important to learn but easy to measure. The citizenship test is a perfect example. I was going to stand here today and tell you in great detail about the greatest generation. You know, the ones who conquered Hitler and the Great Depression, and their lack of civic knowledge proven on a number of tests in 1915 and 1943. Many confuse Thomas Jefferson with Jefferson Davis, but here's the short version. They became the greatest generation not by winning on Jeopardy, but by getting us out of jeopardy. You just can't measure stuff like that on some standardized test. Instead, let me tell you about a classroom I visited a couple of weeks ago that's building the next great generation. I was one of several adult community members asked to judge U.S. involvement in world affairs projects. Students worked alone or in small groups to explore issues like, should the U.S. use diplomacy or military means to denuclearize North Carolina? That'd be good too. North Korea. Should we continue to fund AIDS projects in Africa? Should we spend more troops to Syria? Should we renegotiate NAFTA? There are even some about the Iran nuclear treaty. The students created posters packed with information, political cartoons illustrating opinions, some drawn by the students themselves, pro and con arguments for various options, and the students' own opinions. And let me add here, it was common for the students working together on one issue to have divergent views, yet they remained friends. The students displayed, presented, and discussed their projects with a group of adults, including school board members, teacher candidates, principals, school resource officers, veterans, and local leaders. Think of the sets of knowledge and skills the students had to master: foreign policy knowledge and tools, research, writing, critical thinking, public presentation, and more. This was not an AP or honors course. This is a typical high school classroom with students across the academic spectrum, all of whom participated. As a judge, I found myself agreeing with some, disagreeing with others. When asked what they got out of the project, their most common response was, the more I learned, the more difficult a problem this became. This is the kind of learning assessment experience encouraged by the state's social studies civic standards, one that replicates the many demands of citizenship. I walked away thinking, do I know if they know all 100 items on the citizenship test, or even 50% of them? No, I don't. Do I know if they're prepared to play their role as effective citizens? Yes, I do. The state social studies civic standards ask students to analyze nonfiction tests, identify key issues, and propose solutions. Whose job does that sound like? Elected officials, and as well as that of an effective citizen. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service.
Matt Cosio?
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Matt Kojal. I'm in my 5th year of teaching biology at Northridge High School in Greeley. I'm here today to speak in support of the recommendations of the Science Review and Revision Committee and in support of the alignment of Colorado science standards to the next generation standards to bring NGSS to Colorado classrooms. In my own classroom, when working to develop engaging lesson plans over the past 5 years, I first used NGSS and their recommendations to determine essential information, important concepts, and how what I am teaching students in biology relates to other subject areas. In the real world, it's extremely rare that anyone would use biology in isolation without information from other subject areas, and NGSS reflects this reality with their cross-cutting concepts. Only after building my lesson plans using NGSS do I then go back and align them to current Colorado science standards. Colorado science standards, as they are currently constructed, do not offer nearly as much support or structure as the NGSS standards, especially when collaborating with other science teachers on how best to reach the expectations of specific standards. As a new teacher, the current science standards look like a series of standalone statements that don't easily translate into lesson plans. And trying to determine how my curriculum and my pedagogy could reflect the standards was tough enough. Trying to imagine, as a first-year teacher, how the state science standards would play out in my classroom without simply resorting to worksheets that ask students to memorize facts. Sorry, lost my place there. How the state science standards would play out in my class without simply resorting to worksheets that ask students to memorize facts. It was a difficult task. Creating engaging lesson plans tied to the standards and explaining how essential information student needs to learn was tied to content in other classes was made so much easier for me by using NGSS, primarily because I was able to rely on the associated clarification statements as well as the assessment boundaries, which give specific examples and the depth of the content needed to know. Their clarifying remarks regarding the specific standards and the assessment boundaries, identifying what is beyond the scope of the class has really helped me to have productive conversations with colleagues as well as identify how best to serve the students in my class. I've been able to build assignments that tie in well to what students learn in language arts and in STEM-related courses, specifically because of the NGSS cross-cutting concepts and their connections to engineering practices. I'm in full support of Colorado aligning to the NGSS standards in science classrooms across the state. It provides the structure needed for new teachers. It helps teachers design authentic and appropriate lessons as well as formative assessments, and it clearly details in specific language what is needed for mastery of the content and of the standards. Without the template provided by NGSS, I would have been lost 4 years ago as a rookie science teacher. And because of the Colorado standards as currently constructed, they don't provide the detail necessary to identify when students have mastered a standard. With NGSS standards, I've been able to have productive conversations around authentic assessments and engaging lessons that would not have been possible with the current standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Casey Ellis?
My name is Casey Ellis, and I am a 22-year middle school science teacher, majority of that time at Cherry Creek. I've also served on the Science Spoke Committee for creating our state ESSA plan and worked with CDE and Pearson in writing, evaluating, and range-finding questions for the 8th grade science CMAS. What I can tell you is that when Cherry Creek decided to implement NGSS in conjunction with CAS, we began to have a more cohesive and clear-cut curriculum that was easier to instruct and assess for. I found CAS to be vague in scope. I started my teaching in 1996 in Cherry Creek, and for brand new teachers, having the CAS standards was very confusing at best. Arguments would ensue amongst what we were supposed to teach, what we shouldn't teach, how in depth we should go. NGSS has removed a lot of that. One of the things that we did in my school is when we got NGSS and for our Force in Motion, we decided that we were going to have the kids do a project-based assessment instead of a written assessment. So we decided that they were going to build mousetrap cars and explain force in motion, speed, and that kind of physics-y stuff with the mousetrap car. The very first year there were a lot of tears, both by the kids and the teachers. Because it was a lot of, I don't know what I'm doing. Because we were asking them to take their knowledge and apply it in a way that they had never been asked to do. We were asking them to take a mousetrap and build a car and make it go down a ramp or go down the hallway and at a certain speed if that's what they wanted to do. We're now 3 years into that. I will tell you that if we were not to adopt the NGSS, that critical project, which involves all students. I taught in a class with 4 ILC students, 19 SPED students, 2 BD, 4 GT, and the rest were Gen Ed. When I have a project that encompasses everybody and can be modified for everybody, the NGSS does that. Not only that, but it allows me to work with my math teachers in conjunction and my language arts teachers in conjunction, because we were able to work as a team and make sure that math had already taught speed calculations, and that language arts could work with the kids as they were writing up their final explanation for how their car functioned and why maybe it didn't function. NGSS has given us the opportunity to become better teachers of science. I am urging you to please look at NGSS and adopt that for Colorado. It's what our kids need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray Trent. Ben Ortiz. Ray? Oh. Ray's here. I'm sorry.
My name is Ray Trout. Does this sound pretty well?
No.
No?
It needs to be a little louder.
You just have to get really close and
Now?
speak. Yeah.
Uh-oh, I might have to shout. My name is Ray Trout, engineer, long retired. I've been digging into the student testing over the last few years and want to propose an alternative. You are aware of many of the problems with standardized testing, its misuse, its distortion of curriculums. I'm actually a fan of assessment rather than testing, for the most part. I'm offering a light touch assessment approach that makes use of sampling, statistics, kind of a scary prospect for many, but I'll push it anyway. Assessment without the trauma that goes on in many schools, teachers, students. Something more formative and without personal information being passed out of the school, especially online. The plan is to have visiting assessors visiting about 4 times for a subject in a school year, using some simple processes with a spreadsheet, using rated queries, sort of an RIT rated base, tied to the local curriculum, but also tied to things farther afield so you can associate local results with anything else in the world you'd like to. You need a query bank, you need a spreadsheet process like I have. Well, you need to select assessors, assign pseudonyms to the students, so even the assessor does not know the name of the student being assessed, because that kind of information is, well, it has problems, especially not doing it online. The ultimate of this is to have only about 20 points for the whole subject for the year, all of it broken down in detail by points within, but by topics, and being plotted at the time, all processed at the time, for use at the time. The teacher can see the diagrams of the results as they accumulate through the year. You can roll it up, again without personal information. You can link the assessments for a subject in a classroom to the actual curriculum in place at that classroom, to any other curriculum that you'd like to compare with, if necessary, which then ties to test anywhere. It's a looping process, and it uses a lot of math and statistical processes, but I think my opinion is that it'd be better than what we're faced with right now with the standardized testing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ortiz.
Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. My name is Ben Ortiz, and I am currently earning my master's in education at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I am here to speak against implementing the United States Civics Test in Colorado schools. Like all Americans, I come from a family of immigrants. My paternal grandparents migrated here from Puerto Rico in the 1950s, and my maternal great-grandparents immigrated here from Germany in the late 1800s and early 1900s. One of my maternal great-grandfathers even has his name etched in stone on Ellis Island. Recently, a good friend of mine went through the immigration process and took the United States Civics Test. In preparation for the test, a few friends and I took turns quizzing each other to help him study. What surprised me was how horribly some of my American friends performed on the practice tests. I thought to myself, how is it possible that they could have graduated from high school without this knowledge? This test has information that is important for all citizens to have in order to make informed decisions. But as I have learned through my studies in education, if you want students to perform well on an assessment, we have to prepare them for it. If you want them to speak before a government body, as I am today, you have to teach them the skills necessary to write a persuasive speech or letter and provide them with practice in public speaking. If we want students to take a test, generally, that preparation involves some form of memorization. Unfortunately, as happened with my friends, unless the memorized material is continually used, that memory can fade and be replaced with something else. All that preparation and memorization can take a lot of time. And if you ask any teacher in this room, I'm sure that they will tell you that they already feel they do not have enough time in the period, day, semester, or year to teach students everything that we want to teach them. Given the time constraints that we are under and the realities of the limits of memory, the question we need to ask ourselves is not whether students should know this information or not, because the answer to that question is yes. Students graduating high school should know the answers to questions like, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted? How long is a term for a member of the House? And what is freedom of religion? But they should also be able to do something with that information, both to keep it fresh and to be informed and engaged members of our democracy. After all, the point of this test is to ensure that new citizens understand enough about our history and our political processes to ensure that they can make informed decisions. The public school system is responsible for making sure that we go one step further in creating good citizens. We are responsible for not only teaching our students the information necessary to make informed decisions, but also how to be active, engaged, and responsible members of our democracy. In closing, I leave you with this question. What does a good citizen look like to you? Is it someone who can complete a game of state-sponsored bar trivia, or someone equipped with the skills, knowledge, and desire to engage in our democracy? Thank you for your time, and I hope you take my thoughts into your consideration.
Thank you. Good timing. Douglas Watkins?
Good morning. I'm here representing the science curriculum and instruction within Denver Public School District, and just wanted to share with you how Denver Public Schools has prepared for your adoption, your hopeful adoption of the proposed changes to the Colorado Academic Science Standards. DPS has worked over the last 3 years to lay the foundation for moving to the next generation science standards. I'll talk to you about our perspective on implementation costs, teacher readiness, and equity. So for implementation costs, DPS has a curriculum review and adoption cycle for the evaluation of resources for science, social studies, math, and literacy. The cycle includes funding for all district schools to implement the new resources. Thus, funding is currently available for new resources that align to the new Colorado academic standards. Anecdotally, within DPS, we have a year-long biology curriculum that's written, designed for the next generation science standards, and I've recently crunched the numbers on consumables, so like the parts of a science curriculum that are used up every year and can't be reused. And for the new NGSS design curriculum, it's 41 cents per student. For the old curriculum that we have adopted now, it's $2.64 per student. So just that's one piece of anecdotal information. The costs, another part of implementing new standards would be the cost for professional development needed to prepare teachers to engage in those standards appropriately. DPS, as part of a curriculum adoption process, provides professional learning for new curriculum, including a focus on both the standards and the resources themselves. Grant funding, in addition to district funding, is available. DPS has grant-funded professional learning from a variety of grants focused on NGSS and STEM-aligned learning, including funding from Urban Advantage, the Hewlett Foundation, XTO Energy, and NSF grant for computational thinking. Many of these grants contribute towards open educational resources, meaning that other districts and rural districts throughout not only Colorado but the United States will have access to a lot of the learning and the resources that are created through that grant-funded work. NGSS compared to the current Colorado academic standards with regards to equity. I've watched some of the previous board meetings, and you guys have done your homework and read up on the Next Generation Science Standards and specifically the framework. I'd like to read for you before my time's up a quote from the framework regarding equity. Equity in science education requires that all students are provided with the equitable opportunities to learn science and become engaged in science and engineering practices, with access to quality space, equipment, and teachers to support and motivate that learning and engagement, and adequate time spent on science. In addition, the issue of connecting to students' interests and experiences is particularly important for broadening participation in science. The Next Generation Science Standards and the proposed revisions to the Colorado Academic Science Standards do that last point really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Kellogg? Nancy Kellogg?
First, I would like to thank the state board members for allowing us to speak today. I am Nancy Kellogg from Boulder, Colorado. I've been engaged in science education for over 50 years and in many different roles. Currently, I'm retired, but I still am active with national groups on various committees, and I'm an awards chair for one organization right now. So first I want to mention that I was a co-chair on the first set of state standards. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we're not starting from scratch. We are building with each set of standards to make them better. And indeed, I really believe that NGSS standards are superior. I interact with people from other states all the time that are implementing those standards, and they're having some great success. And it's critical that our students are going to be competitive with students from other states. Colorado shouldn't be hiring science people to come here. We should have our own students being hired by employers. So that's one of my big issues. I want to talk a little about implementation issues because I was at your April meeting, and I know that was a big concern. One of the key things is that students really do need to do science as well as have the core content that you basically integrate with the standards. So to do that, you need experiments, you need field work, you need a variety of hands-on kinds of activities to engage your students, and the 3 dimensions of NGSS are integrated together to allow for that. So it's critical that we integrate content and process, and not done in isolation. The standards do provide for workforce readiness, which is critical. And one of the things I didn't mention is it's really important to know that any schools should have the equipment and materials available. I mean, I started teaching in 1968 in Colorado Springs, and we had fabulous lab equipment, and it's still there, I'm sure. So you can actually go out to the grocery store and buy some equipment as well. So it's not like you have to start from scratch. Another implementation concern is the curriculum piece, and that you can get from many sources, as was mentioned. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Samuel Goldman?
Hi, I'm Samuel Goldman. I'm a former student at Overland High School. I graduated a couple years ago and am a current college student. One of my teachers at Overland, Kelly Jones-Waggy, recently brought it to my attention that this board will be considering amendments to the high school civic standards. Of particular concern to me are the various amendments that narrow the scope of the standards to just American government and politics. Having taken a course in comparative government at Overland, I understand the importance of learning about other nations and their government. And I strongly urge you to reject those amendments. In our interconnected world, students need to learn about the workings of other nations that the United States interacts with. Having taken that course in high school, it should be standard that our students, high school students, learn about other governments, learn how they work, and learn how to analyze government in general, not specific governments. While digesting news regarding foreign governments, it's important to understand how the structures of those governments impact their actions. For example, it's important to understand that Iran's president, despite the same title as our president, does not hold the same powers, and that's recently very relevant. And so just being able to understand that really has helped me and helps other students understand American foreign policy and understand the news that's going on around us. And so we don't live in isolation. We need to learn about the world around us and how it operates. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Callie Nichols?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to represent parents in Douglas County to ask for accountability and training regarding implementation of the READ Act. I am reading a parent statement that is representative of many parents' experiences with dyslexia in schools in Douglas County and Colorado. Hello, my name is Megan. My 8-year-old son James has always been a happy, healthy, and well-behaved child. This all changed in first grade. After school, he was depleted, dejected, and moody. We knew he was struggling with reading and writing. The school said he did not qualify for services, so we decided we would build him up over the summer, hire a reading tutor, and look forward to a great second year. Second grade started much like first, except that it was more intense. He would come home from school and he was depressed. His friends and peers were soaring in reading and writing, but James was still struggling with very basic reading skills. On October 26, 2017, at bedtime, James told me, "I don't know why I am alive, I am so dumb." We were devastated, so we sought out private testing and received the diagnosis that James is dyslexic. This was the missing puzzle piece and why he was struggling to read and write and having so many emotional issues and low self-esteem. We asked to meet with the school about his diagnosis and get some accommodations for him as recommended in his outside evaluation. On February 17th, we received an email from his teacher that he was placed on a READ plan. There would be no changes in the interventions he was getting at school. It was just a formality that was needed for the state. In fact, they said the READ plan is basically a plan we have to fill out for the state showing kids that are below grade level for reading. It does not provide interventions or accommodations or anything like that. James will never know that he is on a READ plan, and there will be no changes in his intervention. On March 14th, we met to discuss his special education testing. He did not qualify for an IEP. When we inquired about a 504, we were told that despite his diagnosis of dyslexia and his being on a READ plan, he did not qualify for a 504 plan either. The school nurse instead created a healthcare plan for James. We're not sure why. We disagreed. We set up another meeting on March 28th, and the district's special education coordinator was present, and it was decided James would absolutely benefit from a 504 plan. The reason why I am sharing this story with you today is because if there had been a screener for dyslexia, which affects 10 to 20% of the population, you could have saved my son a year and a half of being made to feel worthless and unable to read. Also, if the READ plan had been implemented correctly, we could have seen his weakness earlier on and given him the resources he needed to learn to read before it affected his self-worth and mental health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen Johnson.
Hello, my name is Karen Johnson, and it is my honor to be here today to read this statement from two parents of dyslexic children in Adams 12 District. My son Noah is in 3rd grade at Arapahoe Ridge Elementary School in Adams 12. Noah often misread words, and I usually couldn't decipher his writing. So early this fall, I sent Noah's teacher an email stating my concerns. In response, his teacher told us that she did not have any concerns about Noah's academic performance. At fall conferences, Noah's teacher reiterated this. When I mentioned that his writing samples made me wonder if he might have dyslexia, she empathetically told me that he was fine and there was nothing to worry about. Despite Noah's teacher's reassurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My husband was frustrated that I didn't trust the teachers. After all, out of the 3 of us, she was the expert. After much discussion, I took Noah to a private reading specialist for evaluation, which showed he had numerous and distinct markers of a language-based disability. His evaluation with the tutor was not unlike the periodic assessments done in school. The difference was having a highly skilled professional doing the evaluation. We were referred to a neuropsychologist for a formal evaluation where we learned that Noah has dyslexia and dysgraphia. Because Noah can keep up with his classmates, he has not received any interventions at school. We're not willing to wait for Noah to fall behind. We were told by a 504 plan coordinator from the district that we would be over-accommodating him by allowing assistive technology and extra time on assessments. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated example of the lack of awareness, support, and intervention for students with dyslexia. As a 4th grader in Adams 12, Natalie was incredibly expressive verbally, but struggled with written expression. Natalie was subjected to 3 hours a week of outside tutoring, yet was not identified with dyslexia. Natalie's parents knew something was not adding up, but no teachers ever mentioned dyslexia. It took a per-chance conversation with a friend who also has a dyslexic child to lead Natalie's parents down the correct path. Now in 7th grade, the lack of dyslexia awareness persists. Each year, Natalie's parents have to sit down with each of her teachers to explain what dyslexia is and how to implement Natalie's accommodations. With robust training, teachers would be able to key in onto the dyslexia markers, allowing identification. With dyslexia identification comes the need for intervention. Students with dyslexia have the right to evidence-based dyslexia methodologies such as Orton Gillingham. Parents should be able to rely on their teachers as experts. And with dyslexia affecting 1 in 5 people, I urge the state board to implement policies and regulations ensuring that dyslexia training is part of every educator's toolbox. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have 3 more speakers, and with your permission, I'd like to allow them to finish their speaking so they don't have to come back at 4:30. And if there's anyone else in the audience who did not sign up, please come back at 4:30. That's okay, please. Lindsay Galt-Drekos.
Thank you for having me. Bear with my shaky voice because I am not a public speaker.
It's okay.
My name is Lindsay Drakos. I'm a mother to 3 daughters in Littleton Public Schools. I sent a way too long email to all of you a couple of months ago to suggest adding dyslexia awareness training to the licensure requirements for Colorado teachers. I'm here today as a follow-up to that request. I have 2 daughters who've received outside diagnoses of dyslexia. My oldest was diagnosed as a 5th grader, although I suspected something was going on from the time she was 6 years old. In all of my questions, inquiries, concerns, not one teacher or literacy specialist or SPED teacher or principal recognized what I now know as glaring signs of dyslexia in my daughter. Teaching programs are barely touching on dyslexia. It's the most common learning disability. Up to 1 in 5 kids is dyslexic, and universities give it a paragraph or 2. My daughter had learned to compensate so well that even in 5th grade, she wasn't failing enough to receive the help that she needed. Her standardized test scores in reading went from the 77th percentile in 3rd grade to the 67th percentile in 4th grade to the 44th percentile in 5th grade. She still wasn't low enough to receive help. The way that we deal with dyslexic kids needs to change, but today I'm only asking for you to consider adding dyslexia awareness training to licensure requirements for all educators. If one of those teachers along the way could have recognized the signs that my daughter clearly had, I could have gotten her help years earlier. She believed that she was dumb until this year, when she has received daily Orton Gillingham lessons that have taught her to read fluently and accurately. A kid who has this year read 15 books for pleasure, who will skip 2 grades in math to take algebra in 7th grade, who will be in honors science, and who has gone from remedial English to honors English next year, who is one of the top kids, one of the top 6th graders in her school. This kid believed she was dumb until finally getting a dyslexia diagnosis and the correct instruction. Like my daughter, many kids with dyslexia don't get identified until 3rd to 5th grade, or even later, because they learn to compensate so well for their weaknesses. Around the times that kids should be reading to learn instead of learning to read, we discover that they can't read well at all. The READ Act is great, but it's only catching those who are really struggling in kindergarten through 3rd grade. If many dyslexic kids don't start to struggle until 3rd grade or later, the READ Act will miss them entirely. If teachers are more aware of the signs of dyslexia at different ages, we can intervene earlier, and we can save thousands of kids from feeling dumb when they are clearly not, and teach them to read before they fail. Can I finish very quickly? Virginia has a dyslexia awareness module that's available to all states for free. It's a place to start. Again, not one educator for either of my daughters recognized the signs of dyslexia that they both had, not one. This needs to change, and awareness is a great first step. Thank you.
Alyssa Zoja? Please note, I am allowing you folks to speak instead of tomorrow, because it is not on the proposal for tomorrow. That doesn't mean that we are not, as a board, going to consider the issues that you brought forward, but they're not going to be part of tomorrow. Okay?
Hi, good morning. These are for you. Do I bring them before?
To her, to Busy, please.
Hi there. My name is Elisa Soja, and I'm a parent from Jefferson County. I'm here to talk about people like Albert Einstein, Walt Disney, and Charles Schwab. Yes, amazing minds with dyslexia. Repeated dyslexia affects up to 1 in 5. My husband and I wasted well over $30,000 for ineffective tutoring by national tutor companies as well as teachers not teaching at the phonemic level. The more creative a child is, or the milder the dyslexia, these children don't get diagnosed until much later in life and never give, or actually several don't ever get diagnosed. They just give up. Last year, my son in 8th grade, exhausted, defeated, and desperate, he begged to be taken out of school. Thank God for my Moms in Prayer friend who called me and led me to the understood.org resource site for me to find the information that I needed desperately to confidently ask for a dyslexia evaluation. My son's middle school SPED person said my son had no symptoms of dyslexia, though he finally fell 2 years behind in reading. I was confident enough in pursuing a dyslexia evaluation, so I went to Children's Hospital. Why, yes, my son has dyslexia. After receiving 22 hours of Orton Gillingham multisensory type instruction tutoring last summer, my son's grades went from D's and F's to A's and B's. I would much have preferred to spend the $3,000 on the Orton Gillingham tutor than the $30,000 on ineffective tutoring, which was just practice tutoring, and again, not at the phonemic level. Even further, if there had been kindergarten testing for dyslexia, like they have in some other states, my son would have been identified as an at-risk child, and he would have been appropriately put into possibly like an ability grouping type of scenario. He would never have needed outside supports, because like many of these amazing minds, my son's gift is actually in memory and problem solving. So yes, again, he made it until 8th grade before finally just succumbing. My son is just one example why it is imperative for early identification. Kindergarten testing for dyslexia is also the fastest way for you to meet your all meets all, as well as your goals by 2022. In particular, your 88% of students that you'd like reading at the end of third grade. Also, 80% of your schools needing support and academic improvement will raise and maintain their performance. And then again, a real neat one, 20% more historically underserved students will achieve academic expectations. This is just an amazing way for you to be able to meet those objectives. Finally, by early assessments for dyslexia, you will directly impact failure outcomes of unidentified dyslexia, like poor testing ability, failing grades, unhappy teachers, school dropout, drug abuse, anxiety, depression, suicide, and the preschool to prison pipeline. My number is in that book. I'd love to get together for coffee or at least help connect you with some dyslexia simulations that can incredibly affect your ability to look at the different neurodiversity brains of dyslexics. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Alyssa Beckerman.
Hello, I'm here to speak about adding and including comparative politics and government in the American standards I'm nervous for Colorado. My name is Alyssa Beckerman, and I'm a senior at the University of Denver, majoring in biology and geography, and also studying history and psychology. I'm a native of Aurora, Colorado, and a proud alum of Overland High School. In high school, I had the pleasure of taking both AP US Government and AP Comparative Government. While in AP US Government, I developed a sense of how our institutions operate, it was not until I took AP Comparative Government that I was able to really understand and appreciate my rights and responsibilities as an American citizen. To uphold our democratic systems, we must understand what makes our government effective and how it could be improved. In AP Comparative Government, I learned about other governments, such as those of Great Britain, Russia, and China, and how they function, and about major constitutional issues they face. As a result, I was better able to understand our own country's operations. I understood what happened when democratic systems fail, including those of freedom of speech and freedom of press, or they are not existent. I gained a more well-rounded view of welfare and civil rights violations because I saw how such challenges played out in other countries. In turn, I became more politically aware and able to succeed in the globalizing world around me. My comparative government education inspired me to appreciate what I have. It made me realize that just because something is not happening to us right now doesn't mean it can't or won't happen. We may believe that as a whole we, or as individuals, are facing great adversity, but when we look at how people in other countries have it, we can more fully appreciate what we have and strive to make social change. It is critical for high school students to be able to evaluate their own government and civil rights more fairly and equitably, and that process begins by learning to compare and contrast how other governments function. This way, students can determine what works, what doesn't, and resolve issues that they are passionate about. Having a global framework and understanding how those issues unite us and relate to us on a local level even, make us more civically engaged. In high school, I found a framework by which to live my entire life. I learned to critically analyze my own governmental entities from the local to the federal level and to figure out how I can improve them. Without my comparative government education, I would have run the risk of developing an isolationist perspective or becoming overwhelmed by increasing levels of globalization by not understanding how global issues intersect and impact me. My comparative government education made me more appreciative of what rights I have and more adamant about safeguarding those same rights for others in my local community and beyond. My education has taught me to think globally and act locally, and that is in great part because from an age at which my lifelong values and behaviors were developing in high school, I learned about comparative government and politics. It would be irresponsible for the Colorado Department of Education to do anything other than promote a governmental and civic education that prepares high school students to navigate, understand, and engage with our interconnected world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to speak to us. We deeply appreciate it. We do listen, even though we don't speak back. And thanks for staying. And now I'm going to ask you to leave because we're going to because I'm going to ask Ms. Cordial to call an executive session so that we can talk about other matters. But thank you so very, very much.
An executive session has been noticed for today's State Board meeting in conformance with 24-6, 402-3A, Roman numeral CRS to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to 24-6, 402-3A, Roman numeral 2 CRS, and matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or rules or state statutes pursuant to 24-6, 402-3A, Roman numeral 3 CRS.
Sure will.
There's so many free workshops.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Nice to meet you.